Hello, she said, hopefully. Things are bouncing, which looks hopeful on the audio front, but you never know. We've already had a little issue, haven't we, Mike? Several, with things not happening, but it looks like it's okay now. So, fingers crossed. My fingers are firmly crossed. Hello and welcome, everybody. Chat's going crazy, and I can even see some of it. Not all of it, but some of it. So, hello to Renee, first one in, my word, closely followed by young Jonathan. Hello, Jonathan.
Happy birthday to Kim's mum.
Oh, happy birthday, Kim's mum. Yay.
And on Sunday, because I'm reading ahead here.
You are?
Yeah. On Sunday, it's Kiva's Gotcha Day.
Gotcha days are always fabulous. Fabulous, fabulous gotcha days. Who else have we got in here?
Anyway, hello, gang.
Yes, hello, everyone. That would take care of it, wouldn't it?
We are here.
Hello, Debbie. Hello, Kim. Who else have we got in here? I'm hoping we've got a full complement of everybody. Where is Renee at the moment? The world traveller. Where are you?
Italy.
Oh, nice. Hello, Brilliant Sigma. And who else have we got? I think we're all accounted for. Graham. Hello, Graham. The mic's a bit crackly. Don't tell me the mic's a bit crackly, because that would need a reboot. How does it sound to you, Mike? He's having a listen now.
I am having a listen.
But he's behind.
Sounds okay to me.
Renee, you're crackly. Oh no, Jonathan says it was just him. No, it can't be crackly. Don't tell me it's crackly. What can we do about crackly? Nothing. Nothing at this stage, not without a reboot. Which would mean cat-bashing the entire show. So hopefully it's not my end. Hopefully it's the YouTube end. And we can leave it all to YouTube and blame them. That works for me. That work for you, Mike?
Yeah.
Excellent. Right. Okay. Yay. It sounds fine to some people. Maybe it depends on where you are. Maybe it's an Italian thing. An Italian and a Manchester thing. Oh, we had good news this week, didn't we? She said, laughing. No, not good news at all. No. We are living in the COVID capital of the UK. Trafford, which is quite tiny, isn't it? We're talking a couple of 100,000 people and that's it. Capital of COVID. What was it? Was it the highest rate of COVID in the UK? There you go. So, not going out. Let's leave it at that. Right, let's see if everything's working. Let's do some magic beans and see if everything's working. We do like magic beans when they work. Oh, have you noticed? Remember that problem where everything went hazy? That seems to have stopped. But I'm not saying it too loudly in case it's not. Right, we have the week at MacBites headquarters and it starts off crazy. Finishes the same way, to be honest. Then we've got Affinity Publisher. The finished job went off to press on Monday. So I will show you the final file and explain why decisions were made the way they were made. Then we have a request from young Jonathan, which is effectively using RSS. So we'll cover that. We have free software and we have the software I use, which is not free, but there's good news about it. Then we're starting a little mini-series on numbers. It's the Numbers 11.2 update, and as is usual with Apple, there's usually one app that gets more love than the other two, and in this update, it's Numbers. So Numbers have added pivot tables, but we're starting with what they've already got and moving on to pivot tables. Then we've got Mike with the Excel data model that you were cursing not long ago.
I was.
You were. So he's found a fault with that. And then we've got the first session totally dedicated to Scrivener Compile. Oh, Scrivener Compile is where it's at. Right, then you need to check what has it done to you this week. 240 with me this week. And I wouldn't mind, but this video I was watching had a 4K version. And they've showed it to me at 240. So there you go. Make sure that you are watching at 1080, and while you are down there, there is a like button, and if you were to click that like button, we would love you forever, wouldn't we? I have to wake him up every now and then, you know. Wouldn't we? Yes, there you go.
My cables are tangled.
Oh, he's got tangled cables, says the poor boy. Well, while you ponder the like button, we'll start on Saturday. You know, you've just had a late night with the show. You're trying to rest, and obviously, it being Saturday, Lola wants an early walk. How far wrong could a walk go? Oh, I'm glad you asked. Let me fill you in. There they were, trotting nicely, when Lola came across a garden wall. How much trouble could she get in with a garden wall? Well, she jumped the garden wall and found something. It was no longer alive. It was a bird. No, not satisfied with sniffing said bird. Oh, no. She picked it up, ready to bring it home for me to defeather and cook, didn't she?
Yes.
Before Mike had to deal with it. But shall we share with them that you got a bit of a phobia of dead birds? So actually taking this dead bird off Lola wasn't really an option, was it? So we had to see how well she responded to commands. Whether it was the panic in Mike's voice of drop it or just the instruction, we don't know. But she did, bless her, didn't she?
She did.
And left it behind. I mean, roadkill first thing on a Saturday morning. Lola! Anyway, lunchtime came round and it was the big derby match. Manchester United versus Manchester City. Not the boys, because the boys were away on international duty. No, it was the girls. And it was an honourable draw, which wasn't bad, was it? Although there was a sending off involved, etc. And I think that was actually on the TV, although I didn't actually see it myself. Then we went on to 8 Show Saturday. So all of that was happening. And it was Kaz's birthday. So I think it was her birthday show, wasn't it?
It was.
On repeat all day, because it was her birthday. But at 8 o'clock, we went into Brooklyn's 196 by request, where the theme, it was happiness. Well, actually, it was in honour of Mental Health Day, wasn't it? But we decided all happy songs, so we had an absolute blast. The Tesco man managed to arrive within his allotted hour, so ticking that box that week. And that took us on to Sunday. Yeah, I said to Mike, do not take Lola the same route that you did yesterday, because I don't want her coming back with another bird. Anyway, she didn't. It was book club day. I'm getting really busy with this because there's 2 books this time. But it's been nicely organised. Really nicely organised. So it was only 2 hours 32. Which took me to... That was 28 minutes to 1. So not bad, that. Not bad at all. But if you remember, I said on Monday there was going to be doings afoot. Because on Monday I had to send the job to print. No matter how many times you check it, I guarantee you'll find a typo the second you push send. But so far, so good, haven't we? Yeah. I said, don't look at it after you've sent it. So it went off. So I'll be talking you through what I did following last week. And with it being Monday, we had to head into the studio, ready for MacBites on Tuesday. But book clubs moved, not the Sunday one. There was going to be a 2 o'clock in the morning on a Friday one. But due to popular demand, we've decided 1 o'clock on a Tuesday is a good time. And it was grand because Carol was there as well. So that's a different book entirely. This is for people intending to write books or people who are writing books or who have written books. And this is how to write useful books. And it's regimented. An hour 5. And there was only the 5 because about 4 of us decided to stay behind and have a quick chat. And it really was a quick chat. Oh, dear me. And then we went outside. It was bizarre. The sun was shining from behind us, but that's the view in front of us. It was like Armageddon. So I said, let's take some pickies quick. That is not edited. That it went black, jet black, but the sun was shining. You can see the sun shining off the houses. It was totally bizarre. So once Armageddon had been dealt with, we then headed into the edit and the publish. And if you notice, we were an hour late. There was a reason we were an hour late, though. And that's because Apple decided to announce an event. Don't do that on a Tuesday when I'm trying to publish and edit the show. Really? But we did get a MacBites out, albeit an hour late. Yeah, we really did have sun. We did. It was genuine, that. But obviously you can see when the sun comes out, we get very confused and the clouds come out with it. It was shocking. It was bad. So we had a show. That was also the day that Unleashed was announced. So we were half waiting for that. ready with the show. But then to try and edit it into the show, that's why it was 9 o'clock and not 8 o'clock. But yes, we had a good time. And I even got to use some of my legal training, so definitely worth it. And my love of literature. It's not often you get a quote in a podcast from Bleak House, is it?
No.
No, but it was a good one, and I had to explain it to Mike. Which took us on to Wednesday. Now, you know this not leaving the house thing? I won't say it's been a while, but this is what the cash left over from our last expedition looks like now. Yes, that is mould on the coins. I opened a drawer looking for something entirely different, and I took these coins out and I said to Mike, these were from the last time we went out, and there's actually green mould on them. Great fun. So Thursday, huge day on Thursday. We had a birthday to celebrate at MacBites headquarters, not in the least. Oh, it was MacBites Siri's birthday. He was 10 on Thursday. I can remember the day he arrived like it was yesterday. Oh, what great fun we had. So, yes, a party was had, obviously. If you would like to hear about the day he arrived, it really is the story of the day he arrived. Episode 58 of MacBites is the MacBites crew and the Holy Grail. The Holy Grail, of course, being MacBites Siri. It was an iPhone 4S. That was what it started as before it became known as MacBites Siri. And Mike wasn't buying. Mike wasn't buying because he said it was only a year since he'd got his iPhone 4. And the only difference was Siri. To be honest, it was a good job he didn't, wasn't it? Because otherwise we'd have had two scrapping it out.
True.
Lady Siri arrived later. Lady Siri's actually an iPod Touch. But yes, it was MacBites Siri's arrival day. Do you know my abiding memory of that day?
What?
Apart from getting up at stupid o'clock. We were in Liverpool before 7. So it was diabolical. No, afterwards, full of excitement and signing up for 50 gig free storage from Box, we were in Starbucks minding our own business. Mike had booked a day off work. And his boss rang and spent 2 hours talking to him on the phone. I remember that.
Yeah, but she was telling me people were getting sacked.
I know, but that happens. Every time Mike takes a holiday, that happens.
And did I want to be one of them?
Yeah, did you want to be one of them? Well, no was the answer to that, because, we just bought MacBites Siri and he needs feeding and things. Oh, my. Now, last night was also almost a calamity. We've got 3 terabytes of Dropbox space. Totally unexpectedly. Well, obviously we pay for it, but totally unexpectedly because we pay for a different feature of Dropbox. But you only get this particular feature of Dropbox, which is annotations on audio and video files, which is critical to us, if you have 3 terabytes of storage. So we've started moving files into Dropbox. But we've hit a bit of an impasse, haven't we, Mike? Some files work great on Dropbox, but they don't work on Google Drive. Others work great on Google Drive, don't work on Dropbox. So it gets confusing. But we had files in Dropbox, and I'm busily trying to explain to Mike where he should be putting the files. So we're moving files around and saying that one should be there and that one should be there. And that one I'm going to leave to you because it's not my file and it shouldn't even be in there. When all of a sudden, for both of us, all the files disappeared. And I mean, every file in Dropbox. Mike then says, I can see it here and it says you've deleted it. Now I'm like, well, bad words were said. I did not delete the files. There were no files, but I did not delete them. But in the history window, it was telling him I had. So, minor heart attacks all around. And only recovered enough to avoid medical help. They all came back. So it clearly wasn't me, was it? If they came back, I didn't delete them in the first place. It lied. That could have caused complete domestic chaos here. Anyway, they all bobbed back, so all now calm again. Now thinking, need the files on Dropbox and Box and pCloud. I won't mention iCloud. And everywhere else all at once. Because if they're not everywhere, they're probably nowhere. So that was fun last night. But not as much fun as today. Lola was up to her usual tricks of finding something she wanted to bring home from her walk. Do you know, she needs a treadmill, that girl.
She does.
She does, yeah, because this time it was that. In case you're wondering, it's the remnants of a torched wheelie bin in the park. Only discernible, really, by the wheel, isn't it? It will have burnt well. It's blue. And blue bins are for cardboard rubbish. What is wrong with people? What reward is there for setting a wheelie bin on fire? I mean, they probably stood round and watched it melt. Can't they do something useful with their lives? So, yeah, that's the local park today. Great fun. Does this happen anywhere else? Or is it just us here? Anyway, let's move on and have a look at the finished job in Affinity Publisher. Well, you tell me if that kind of stuff happens where you are, or if it's just crazy round here. Maybe they're all infected with COVID and they're trying to burn it out of themselves or something. Wouldn't put it past it. Right, let's go in and find Affinity Publisher. I did have that open. I'm sure I had that open. Don't start playing with my mind. Right, it'll be the last file I had open anyway, which was the demo file there. Right, this is the final file. Homepage was almost done. You know, I only had to change the date, but I did decide to make 2 more changes to it. And this is probably more to do with what it is, which is, a gala dinner. It's a sportsman's dinner. And many people will keep the programme as a souvenir. And the thing is, there's lots of these dinners, isn't there? Which is proving quite interesting in the COVID stakes. So they may have 4 or 5 of these eventually and may not remember which one belonged to which event. So given that the charity are paying through the nose to host this thing at the Manchester Suite at Old Trafford, I thought it was probably pertinent to put the Manchester Suite Old Trafford on the front. And that also then meant that would have looked a bit odd without the date, so I put the date in. Luckily, it fitted just nicely in that gap that I had between the clock and the title. Although I did say to Mike, from an aesthetics perspective, it looked better without the date. But we put the date and the location in anyway. Then there was the double page spread that we looked at last week. And I did decide to put the logo to fill the gap. So that, I don't think I had to make any changes from when I did it live last week. The only change I made between the 2019 version and the 2021 version was to put a capital T on the word "the." Who will be the most famous ex-footballer at that gala event? Do we know who they've got going?
Paddy.
Paddy Crerand, from the 68 squad that won the European Cup. Last year they had Arthur Albiston, didn't they, from the 80s? Did Poncho Pearson arrive?
No, that was the other dinner.
Well, who was the one? Oh, it was Lou Macari.
It was Lou Macari,
yeah, because there was a rousing chorus of Skip to Malou, and that was because Lou Macari had arrived. Didn't Brian McClare go to one?
Jockey went to last week's.
Oh, he did, but that was because it was in Scotland. We'll let you know. We'll let you know this time next week, hopefully. They don't really announce who's going in case they don't make it, but they do invite about 8 to 10. So we'll let you know. I think it's safe to say it probably won't be Eric Cantona, which might have got me there. But COVID, so probably not. No. Sir Alex doesn't tend to go, does he? No. So no, it won't be him. It definitely won't be him. I'm thinking we went to one last year and Ollie was there. That was in the Manchester Suite, wasn't it? It's the Disabled Manchester United Supporters Association. And Ollie did turn up and give a talk. And the interesting thing was, at that point last year, he wasn't doing very well, was he? And there was talk of him being out before Christmas. But he got a rousing reception at this event. And he did a really nice speech. So we don't know. We'll find out. Right, the centre needed quite a lot of changes. And that was because the running order, which is on the left, was longer. We've got more people speaking. So it was really around the 9 o'clock point, which was the guest speeches with Carly and Roy Kavanagh and then some singing of the Flowers of Manchester. So we had to move it up. So if you remember last time, it was probably across there. About there. We had to move it up. But we took a decision, because the other thing we could have done was left it where it was and changed the size of the font. But working on the principle, it was going to be difficult enough to read at A5 size anyway. We decided we would move it up. The knock-on effect of that was we decided to move the menu title up so it married up with the left and right. And then the starter also married up with this side. The other issue would have been if we'd have made it smaller on the left, you'd have to have made it smaller on the right. And we've got room on the right. So that's why we took the decisions that we did with that. The majority of the work involved these 2 pages. And this was because we were changing all of the text. And we have nowhere for the overflow. So either a story was going to have to be missed out completely if it couldn't fit, or we'd have to change the fonts and stuff on everything. So the first job for me was getting the graphics on there, but not being overly concerned about the placement of them. And that freaked Mike out. He was like, well, can't we do the graphics? No, Mike, we're not doing the graphics yet. Because if we have the graphics in a certain place, and you then decide that you need to change the text, you're going to need to fiddle. So I said, we'll scale the graphics as the last job. The text went in. I think the text was the same size as last time. This graphic proved to be no problem at all because it was an SVG. The others, that one was no problem. This one, if I double click on that, you can see a blue border. So I'll draw a border around.
Kim and Renee say the centre pages are pleasing to the eye.
Oh, good. Right, the blue border that is within that pink border is the actual size of the original photo. So I have cropped it down to what it is to fit it in. So we started off with the full image, and if we could have left the full image in, we may have chosen to do that. It did look, wherever it's situated in Trudering, which I'm guessing is quite small, isn't it? And is the airport still there? Hence the field behind it. There's a field behind that and it looks really nice, which was on the left. But I said, obviously the focus of the image is the showcase that's in the middle. And we really need to focus on that. And we need to gain back as much space as we possibly can.
Because it actually looks like a bus stop, doesn't it?
It does. I thought it looked like a bus stop. But, in the full context, it doesn't. So I said, well, there's no point having, blue sky and trees all around it when that's the centrepiece. And there's so much text, as you can see, and it is smaller than the rest of the document because that's where all the stories are. So we decided to crop that. So it just focused on the centre part of it. Then we had the presentation of the ribbons over here. Couldn't really do much with that in terms of cropping it. So it was a matter of trying to get that to a size where it worked. If it was smaller, you'd gain one line back because this line at the bottom would wrap round underneath it. But one line of text underneath that didn't really work. So that one, there wasn't much to do in terms of editing the image. This one didn't have an associated image with it, the middle story, so that was fine. And that brought us on to this last one, which was a living nightmare. I could have made all the images the same size, but it made more sense to me to have them as big as possible. And I did have the smaller one, the next smallest, and then the largest going downwards. So there's like a line. Otherwise, it wouldn't line up anyway. The text was... We could have done with less text, let's put it like that. The biggest change for the image was this one down here. We did have to rewrite that paragraph there to lose one sentence. That one needed cropping because it had actually been taken. We didn't really have a photo of that. What we had was a video. So it was a still from the video. But if I double click on it, you can see how much of it we lost. And the reason that we did that was to fit the text on. So like I say, I wanted the images as large as I could get, but fit all the text on. And whatever the compromise was in terms of, plus the fact, a predictable layout is can work, but sometimes it's a little bit like a catalogue. And this is, given what this is for, it doesn't need to look like a catalogue. So this one here, I had no choice but to crop upwards from the bottom to start with, because there was a timestamp on the video. See, this is practicalities. Well, what you want is a nice 300 dpi image. That's glorious. And what you get is a screen cap from a video, and you've got to make it work. So I took that out, and we had huge problems with the text, that it was just too much of it. So what I decided was this left-hand side was the timestamp and most of that table. And I said, well, we'll just take the table out and crop it down a little bit from that side. So that was how we ended up with what we've got. In an ideal world, yep, maybe you would have put in a fixed layout for it, but that ideal world would have meant adding 4 pages to it. If we'd have added 4 pages to it, we didn't have more stories. So we could have done with 1 more page, but then you've got 4 pages to fill. You couldn't really have done much with this, because if you'd have stretched it over another page, it would have been like 1 paragraph. So that would have meant stretching out 1 page over 5, or finding something gratuitous to put in there. Plus the fact that would have added 50% to the cost. So these are the things that you just have to work with. That's what you've got. And on the back page, I think we had exactly the same, but I rejigged this. I wasn't happy with the fact that it just didn't look like it matched. So I made new styles for the full title. So this is the logo, but that's the full legal title and the charity number and the website. So that needed a new style, and that was added as well, this little bit there. And it headed off on Monday. So hold that thought for when it arrives back and we can share it. Okay, any questions about that? In terms of sending it off for print, it was literally an export through here. It was a PDF. It went out in one of these. Hang on, it was in... I had one of these which was Fogra, and we sent it out that way. So it didn't need much in the way of special sending it out. I have turned off the grid there. So obviously all of this and the bleed and everything else and the background colour, all of that had been tested the year before. And it all worked, and off it went. Right, all awesome. So I will get rid of that. Don't need to save anything in there because it's already been sorted. And we'll head into the next bit, which was, there it is, effectively using RSS. Let me know in the chat, do you use RSS? And if you do, what for particularly? Now, I know many years ago, lots of people were using RSS as if it was standard. And there was a reason for that, and that was because there was Google feeds. Google had a Google RSS system, and they killed it, and everyone was up in arms. Not many people were actually using the Google tools to access these RSS feeds that they were keeping in Google. It was Google Reader. But many, many people were using it as a back end for another RSS feed reader. So, Jonathan's excited. Is it Command and W to remove the margins? No, it's Control and W. So it's weird on a Mac because you hardly ever use Control, but it's Control and W. Right, Jonathan's doing really well. Very impressed, Jonathan. Right, so RSS. What is RSS? Well, it is a technology that first appeared in the 90s, but it didn't really take off until the early 2000s. And to understand what it is and why it's important, you need to think about how you consume web content. So, without RSS, you have to go out and read each site that you're interested in. So, I've put 3 people there, but basically, if you imagine that it's 3 groups of sites that you want at different times during the day. There's the sites you check in the morning. and then the afternoon, and then the evening. You have to go to each and every one of those sites and go and look for content. Now, sometimes that does actually work. The number of times I catch Mike on Facebook every day for a start. Isn't that right, Mike? Ooh, dirty look. But it's true. Mike goes to look at Facebook. Mike goes to look at LinkedIn. But there's other sites that you... Are you now just disturbing me and interrupting me by dropping things?
My lid dropped.
It's behind the leg of your chair, Mike.
Yeah.
He's dropped his lid. Is that because you flipped it? Because I was shaming you.
Yeah.
Right, fair enough. Some sites you'll bother to go and look at, but to be honest, the sites you bother to go and look at are the entertainment sites. They're not maybe, I should go and see if there's an update to that app, or if there's any news from such and such about a new app. It would be really difficult to manage, and you could multiply that by 100 in front of you. So RSS flips it. It flips the whole methodology of you getting updates from a website. I know the arrows look a bit weird because that's all because they're over on top of one another. But RSS is a mechanism by which a website can send updates via RSS, and I will explain what that is and looks like. And you can subscribe to it so the updates come to you automatically. It's quite similar in concept and uses the same technology as subscribing to a podcast. So if we likened it to YouTube, what it would look like is that slide would be you going out and checking every single channel on YouTube that may or may not have something of interest to you. Whereas if you subscribe, those videos are pushed through to you. So it's a better way to consume content that you're already interested in, that you already know that you're interested in. What does it actually look like? It looks like a plain text file with programming code in it, hieroglyphics. In terms of what language it's written in XML, which is extensible markup language. And the idea of that is that it self-describes. So there isn't 15,000 different types of file. There's one file, and in terms of the content of it, the file itself describes what it contains. And that, at the time it was released, was completely revolutionary. I can show you what a file actually looks like. It really is just hieroglyphics. Brilliant Sigma's just said it acts as a read it later service too. It can do. Purist would probably say you'd have to subscribe to it anyway, but yes, you can certainly, depending on the reader you've got, decide that you will mark something to read it later, or you, with whatever workflow you decide to put in, you could send it to Instapaper or Pocket or another read it later service. But that's the critical thing to remember. Instead of you going out to find content, the content finds you. Right, let's go in and actually have a look at one, shall we? I think the up-to-date one for what I've got. So let's go into the Finder. I have one that used to be on Dropbox. This was when Dropbox had stuff. But where did I put it? I probably didn't put it in there. I wonder if it's resources. I actually had it in here. I wonder if it's in Feeder. There's a good thing. Oh, I took it out. No, that's not good, is it? Right, I will find that and actually show you. So let's show you what a MacBites feed looks like. Let's get into Feeder. Now, this is when I'm creating a feed. So that's what the MacBites feed looks like. Let's get rid of these test feeds. We have 3 working feeds in here. We have the marooned feed, which is marked as finished. We did that in a show. And each show has an entry in here. Obviously, 500 of them. Okay. The MacBites one, we have 2. We have one that's an MP3 and we have one that's the M4A. And that's what they actually look like. So when we come to do a show, we have to open this up and make it wide enough so we can see it. We have to fill in all of this information. And this is meta information. This is the bit that describes the content. And then we put in the description in HTML, and we put it in plain text as well. And then we publish it. And when we publish it, we publish it ourselves. We don't put it up on somebody else's site. It actually lives on MacBites. So somewhere in here, there is MacBites. Here's hoping it's in there. Go on, you can do it. We have a feeds folder. And there are our feeds. There's 2 real feeds, the MacBites feed and the MP3 feed. And we have 2 test feeds. Okay. So I'm going to take this down and actually show you what that looks like. So let's get that on there. And we'll open it from there. There we go. Oh, it downloads fairly quickly, but that's what a feed actually looks like. You can, if you are that way inclined, handwrite this. We started off with the feed being created for us, and you can see, obviously, this is 14 years. So there's 15,650 lines in ours. Look at this. That's episode 1. Oh, good grief, it's episode 1. It should actually say episode 1 somewhere. Or is that episode 2? No, that's episode 1 down there. There's the introductions. There you go, episode 1. Subtitle, episode 1. So that is what it actually looks like. There's a bit of a debate as to what it stands for. I know you've asked in there, really simple syndication. Yes, that's one of the ones, but there's another one which is RDF. Simple syndication. So it depends on how you look at it. But basically it's there to create a standard so everybody can publish a podcast, everybody can publish a blog post, and you can consume them all using the same language, an RSS feed, rather than everybody having to create something individual for their specific content. So it's a standard that has come around. And because it's a standard, it enables us to consume it in a way that suits us. So that's our real one. We're not actually looking at how to create them particularly, but that's how we do it. That's what it looks like. So the next step is, how do we actually consume it? Now, there used to be a plethora of RSS feed readers. In fact, if you go into the App Store and you have a look, you put in RSS, you will find a lot of them. But they seem to last 5 minutes and then they're gone. So what we're looking for is one that's going to be there going into the future and not costing a fortune. Some have been around for a long time. So if I was recommending some from here, Reeder, R-E-E-D-E-R, has been around a long time. What else have we got that's been here a while? These come and go, honestly. You're looking at these and they come and go. But the one I've settled on, there is a free one, but the one I've settled on, ReadKit was one I used, and I liked ReadKit, but I've actually settled on this one, which is News Explorer. And the good news is, for young Jonathan, it's in Setapp. So if you've got Setapp, download that straight away. Right. I've picked this one because it's been around a while. There are frequent updates. It works exactly the way I expect it to work. So I expect certain things of an RSS feed reader. Once I've read an item, I need to be able to process it quickly. I need to either mark it as a favourite or send it to Instapaper or open it in a browser. And I need that to be quick. And News Explorer gives me enough customization to make it really, really fast.
Even I use it.
Even Mike uses it, good grief. It's not often you can say that.
No.
The other thing with it is, because of the nature of RSS, it's consumption based. I need whatever I use to have an iPad and iPhone app that synchronise, and it does. So it's awesome. Off you toddle to find it. I have got mine actually set up. So this is showing you light mode, dark mode, groupings on the side. You've got smart filters at the top. I will show you all of this. I have mine in that mode, which I think is semi-light mode, isn't it? I don't have the poster views, and I don't use like a timeline view either. That looks more like, what was that app we were talking about? The one that was like a magazine and we loved it.
Zeit, or the other one?
The other one. The one before Zeit. Basically a magazine of stuff you know you're going to be interested in. But it was great in the day, but I must admit, I've moved past that since. And I now like it where I know the source of it.
Flipboard.
Flipboard, that's the one. What else have we got in here to show you? That's just adding them, which I'll show you. And then you can read them in separate tabs if you want as well. But the good news with this is, as I say, if you have got Setup, then you've already got access to this for free. As you see, it connects via iCloud. I just leave that alone. I don't tinker with it. Not at all. Ever do I tinker with it. That way, it seems to synchronise. And, if it broke, fair enough. But at the moment, it's not broken. So I'm leaving it be. Okay. Can you watch YouTube videos? You can. And I'll show you how to subscribe to a YouTube feed because I've already got one in mind. But that's the app we're going to be looking at. So what I've done this week, which has been so difficult, is I've left my feed reader alone so you can see it. Unadulterated. All right, so I have got 930 unread items, lucky me. But what I've got, I have smart filters at the top. These are provided for you. So this is your latest news, and your latest news is a certain percentage of the items in your feeds. You can see it's less than the unread items because I've left them be this week. And then I've favourited 308. And I will favourite something if I need to refer to it later. So some of that can probably be dealt with now. But these are smart filters that are provided for you. They won't have anything in them unless you've got content in your groups, etc. So the Apple, Tech, Design, Twitter, Podcasts, Apps and Testing are my groups. And within the groups, I have subscriptions to individual sites. So obviously all of the Apple sites and then tech sites, design stuff. Twitter, I'm subscribed to MacBites Siri. MacBites Siri is a very happy bunny. There was his tweet about it being a very special day, and there was Peter's reply wishing him a happy birthday. So it's a nice way to consume Twitter if you want to keep the content separate. So if you're subscribed to a list or you're subscribed to one individual person, it's a very clean way to consume Twitter and not be concerned with all of the detritus around it. And that was a reply that mentioned MacBites Siri. So there's the reply, and that one's kind of flipped it round. It's quoted it. Okay. So that's what we've got there. Hello, Tony's with us. Good evening, Tony. Renee says he uses Flipboard. Are you sure it was Flipboard? I'm not. I think it was further back than Flipboard.
Well, I've got 2 blog posts. One was Zeit and one was Flipboard.
I think it was older than that, but we'll find it. Hello, Carol! Carol is in the house. Right, so these are the feeds that I've got. How do you subscribe to a feed? Well, most sites tell you that if they've got a feed available. So let's go and have a look at one.
Yes, I recognise the logo.
Have a look. Yes, it was. I remember it. Yeah. It must have got bought out because it became something it wasn't originally. I'm loving the name in the middle at the bottom there. Don't go there, Mike. I see you've not got your adult filter on. Right, let's see if we go to MacBites. What we've got. We do. There it is. So up there, we've got the email address. We've got a link to the Facebook page. We've got a link to Twitter. And we have the RSS feed. So if I click that, it actually shows you the text of the RSS feed. So that is identical to what I've got in Feeder. In fact, in this case, it's not, because this is the feed to the site. Now, first thing, I'm in Vivaldi, I've clicked it, and I'm looking at raw feed. Why am I looking at raw feed? Well, the thing with that is I turned off the mail, the contacts, and the RSS stuff in Vivaldi because I wasn't using it. But by clicking it, what you've got here is the URL. So you could copy that URL, and that is the URL that you need to add it into your RSS feed reader. So down here you can see I've got podcasts, but I haven't actually subscribed to MacBites RSS feed. We'll put it in testing with the rest. There we go. So if I do an add here, right, I can either search for new feeds, I can add a new feed, I can create a new folder, which is a group of feeds in this sidebar, or I can import an OPML file, being an outline markup file. Now, the problem with importing one is, yes, I'd be able to look at it, but it's not updatable or anything. So what I actually want to do is add a new feed. And it takes what's on my clipboard. I didn't even get a chance to paste it. It found it and it put it in the top field. And then it gives me the feed. It tells me what feeds are available. You'll notice that there is a drop down. On this one, there's just the one. So this is anything that's added to the MacBites website. The folder refers to the group in my sidebar. And I do want this in testing, but I have all of that available. I could put it somewhere else. It should probably belong with Apple, but I'll put it in the testing one. If you don't have a folder that suits, then you can always choose one from here and create a new one. But what I'm going to do is add the feed to that testing group, and it appears at the bottom. It's picking up the icon from the feed itself, and it's got 5 posts in it. So looking at this, we have 149 MacBites after hours. We've got 149 Unleashed that look like it's got the wrong poster. I'll have a look at why that would have that. It shouldn't have that poster, it should have the other one. Oh, there we go. It's updated. This is tonight's show. So that's a bit meta, isn't it? This is the episode from Tuesday. And this is the MacBites Live that's happening on Monday. Don't miss it. We're going live at 5 o'clock UK time. So it's posts. It doesn't matter in what category they are. They could be after hours posts. They could be new podcasts. They could be live shows, or they could be posts on the blog. That is what it will show you. And it means that you don't have to go out and check the MacBites website every day, which obviously you do, don't you? That it will come to you if you subscribe to it. So in my testing group, I've also got a YouTube feed here, which is showing me the last of these. Now, I'm pretty sure before I started, I did an update of that. I think I did a re-download, and downloaded came more content from months ago. So you could, the information is there in the feed, but by default, it's only showing it you for a certain amount of time, but you can pull it down from further back. Marooned at MacBites headquarters, for example, there's nothing within the time frame I've told it to keep, because it finished in July, but we don't want to talk about that because everyone will get upset. But if I went to it and said re-download it, it will pull the stuff down, and you can then listen to it. So let's see how many shows it pulls down. Does it do them all? It does. All 500 shows are available in there, and you can listen to them. They will disappear after a certain length of time, but you can still listen to the shows in there, and it will pull them down, and you can decide to do that as and when. Now, this is a good one to show you that if you click on one of these after a certain length of time, oh yes, who remembers 499 when I bought a lady pipe?
Yes.
Oh, and then there was 500 when I unboxed the lady pipe. Be grateful it wasn't a video show. Look at the count down here next to it. As I click on it and it waits 2 to 3 seconds, it marks it as read, which takes down the unlistened to count, or the unread count. It will actually take that down. Other option you've got in here is on this podcast, you could click Command and D, and that would mark them as read. If there's more than 100 shows to be marked as read, it thinks you might have made a mistake, but we haven't made a mistake. So I just need to confirm it. And that will then, in here, you'll still see them. You can still get to them. They're dimmed out, and it automatically takes you on to the next podcast or the next feed for you to look at. And there's an item in there that it thinks we haven't seen. Wait for a couple of seconds, and now it knows we've seen it, and there's no unread count on these bottom ones. So that's actually working with it. So what I tend to do is I would start at the top. All right, how to watch it on Monday. Is there anything there I want to see? Well, if you've got any sense, you'll be watching it with us. But I could do with links, if there's some links that they've got. Now, it'll probably be on Apple's side. But I'm only getting a preview. I'm not seeing the entire article. So it's actually configured, and I'll show you how to configure it, for single key usage. So if I want to read more about that, I could do with opening it in the browser. And to do that, I just have to hit the B key. And it will then open it up automatically in the browser, and I can read the whole thing. From here, if I want to keep any of that information, I've now got the full story in there. What I can do with that is take the link with my extension up here, or I could send it to somewhere else. So if I'm using something like Instapaper, I can do a save to Instapaper. So I just did Command Shift and S, and it needs me to sign in, but it would normally save straight to Instapaper. However, that's because I couldn't read the whole story. But if I'm looking at something else in here and I think, that is the whole thing, I don't need to open that in the browser, it's the whole thing, then you can send it places straight from here, and Instapaper is one of them, with an I. Or I could add it to things as a to-do by using T. Opening Vivaldi is opening it in a browser, so that's B. And these things in here, the middle 5, are your send to options that are set at system level. So the Instapaper option and the Vivaldi option are set within News Explorer, but the middle 5 are my standard send tos. So if we go to our system preferences, this is where it gets tricky with Apple these days. Where's my send to? It's extensions, isn't it? And it's the share menu. And those are the ones that I have clicked. So those 5, that's where they're coming from. If you want to send yours to Craft or Yoink or wherever you want to send it, just put a tick in the box and that will ripple through to News Explorer. So the middle 5 are coming from the system. The others are coming from the system preferences in here, which I'll show you. But what I actually do, so I go find it and I work my way through these. And I like to do it with a keyboard. So everything for me is set up with a keyboard. Right, I'm not interested in that. We know all about that. Right, watch faces, whatever, not interested. Not interested, not interested. And I just go through them like this. When I find one I'm interested in, and some of these will be like, it's not going to be games. Trust me on that, it's not. I'm not interested in that either, really. No. I would find something that I'm interested in. Maybe for the show, maybe for me. I'm not going to be interested in Apple TV. But as now book track and book tracking, I might be interested in. Okay, I found something I'm interested in. With 9 to 5 Mac, the pieces are not complete here, so I would just hit B and send it to a browser. The other option I've got is hitting the favourite icon, which will put it into the favourites up here, and then I can go back to it as a read later app, as was mentioned earlier. But there's a whole range of things in here that I haven't yet looked at. And I deliberately did that, keep it this week so it's realistic. The backstories ones are good, but they tend to be very long. So that's a short one announcing it. But when they do something, it does tend to be quite long and you get a detailed review of something. But just not as many. So in here, all of these were marked as read at the same time. But there's only 6 stories in Mac Stories, but like 180 in 9 to 5 Mac. So it depends on what you subscribe to. So to subscribe, as you know, we've subscribed to MacBites. You have got the option in here to search for new feeds, which takes you up to, you need then to look for either RSS feeds or Twitter feeds and then put in some keywords. So if we wanted to put in Apple and do a search, then up comes things that are marked as Apple News. So it would probably be a good idea if I was subscribed to that one, wouldn't it? And I don't want that in testing. I would want that in Apple at the top, and then add the selected feed. And up it pops. And at that point, I should be able to move it, because that's the one that should be at the top. And what are they saying? What lies are spewing forth from Apple today? They won the case, but they're appealing it. Lovely. No, they are not this week, really, are they? That was a good while ago. Not much coming out of Apple at the moment. But that is how you would find feeds. So there's a couple of ways to find them. Either from a specific website, go and just copy the RSS feed, or you can search for it. Or if it's a podcast, it will have a podcast feed. If it's YouTube, it's got a feed. So if I go in here and copy the link, and then go and look at the link. Please don't be awkward. That's what it looks like. So how you make it work with YouTube is you have that, which is the beginning bit, which is common to everybody. And then at the end, you have the channel ID. So actually, all of that will be common. And what you're looking for is a channel ID to put at the end. Where would you find a channel ID? Luckily, you would find the channel ID from YouTube. So if we toddle off into YouTube and we go to mine, that'll do nicely. I think I'll start talking though, and we could probably do without that.
Carol says she's downloaded it via setup, but it looks different.
Oh, well, it shouldn't look different. How different? How different does it look? Right.
I tried myself, but I don't have setup.
Do you not have it? Not set up? Do you not have News?
I've got News Explorer, yeah.
Oh, right.
I use it.
I think mine's up to date. Right, now why am I not seeing the channel thingy up there? Do I have to go somewhere? It's usually at the end of this, so unless it's hiding it from me.
And Tony's downloaded Elaine Giles as his first feed.
Way! Oh, now I better write something. I'm actually working on that, believe it or not. I think I'm inspired by NaNoWriMo, which is next month. But in essence, all you need is this bit here. Probably, I think you probably start with your favourite sites, and then start adding stuff like podcasts, etc., if that's what you want. Obviously, I've got Twitter feeds. Twitter feeds is just a matter of finding the feed. So again, let's copy the link and look at it in here. And that literally is just at MacBites Siri. So it's Twitter at MacBites Siri or whatever. I like Twitter like that, because that way I don't have to look at people arguing over whether black is white. I much prefer that. Now, one of the apps, which was free, is this one, which is NetNewsWire. NetNewsWire used to be amazing, and it was a paid-for thing, and it wasn't cheap either. It was about $40. And what they decided to do with it, I think first off, the original developer sold it, and then whoever bought it played with it for a bit and then virtually killed it. And it just went into decline. It then ended up back with the original developer. And as far as I know, that's still free. Let's have a look at the App Store. He's going to tell me if it's free or not. So this is an alternative to News Explorer. NetNewsWire. Oh, is it not there at all? Have I mistyped this? Is it separate? Has it gone out of the store? What's happening? Let's try that. No, it's only coming up with that one. So it's obviously not in the store anymore. But as the last time I looked at that, it was totally free. But I didn't switch back to it because I thought News Explorer does everything I want. It does it beautifully. And I can't really trust that you won't sell it again tomorrow. Now, how all of this hangs together, there is a different view in there, which is this view, which is like your, what were we calling that thing? Flipboard. A flipboard view. But I'm never quite sure what I'm looking at and where it's coming from. I have to check underneath where it's coming from. And I do have preferences for stuff like this. But, you know, if you do want to consume it in that kind of magazine look, that's an option for you. But I much prefer checking where the news is from first. So I just have preferences for that. Now, all of this and how it works hangs together by your preferences, which are extensive. So for a start, it syncs every 15 minutes and it gives notifications to let you know it's synced if you give it permission to. And I guarantee you, and I don't think I've got that many feeds, there must be like 20 to 50 updates every 15 minutes. So maybe if you do want that, don't have it notifying you. Then you've got the application item, whether you have lightboard or dartboard, the rounded, standard, whatever, but that's on the dock. I never see my dock, so I don't care, but it might make a difference to you. You also have the unread counter, and whether it's the latest news or the unread, that's what's going to be shown on the dock icon. But again, I don't see it, so I don't care. And then the sidebar unread counts, you can have those just for the smart filters, none of them or all of them. And obviously you can see down here that I go for all of them. Right, what else have we got? Summarise the notifications if it's above 20 items. So in your notifications, in your notification centre, if you've got more than 20, you probably don't want notifying for each and every one. And you can choose whether you include the images or not as well. And whether to delete the notifications of items that you've read. Then you can have the articles that are downloaded, so these numbers that we're talking about here, you can have them indexed in Spotlight, which means if you were to use Alfred or do your search, you would be searching for those stories as well. I don't particularly bother with that, I must admit. And you can choose to delete that if, like me, you decide not to bother. Then you've got your last iCloud sync, which was 4 minutes ago.
Right, we've got Carol sorted now.
Yay! Fantastic. I do use iCloud Sync though, because I want this to synchronise with my iPad and my phone. So I know I definitely want that, so I do use iCloud to sync it. Then we've got storage. So how long do you keep items? And I keep items for 120 days. Now, the only option more than that is forever. And I don't particularly want to be dragging that around with me. But I do keep my favourite items forever. So if something is a favourite, I'm not going to lose it if it's more than 120 days ago. And it cleans the iCloud data weekly. That's the default. I just left it alone. And the last time it did it was 3 days ago. And the storage settings are all synced across devices. I must admit, I haven't, touch wood, had any problem with the syncing, so I don't really fiddle with it. This is the syncing you've got. So the timeout is set to automatically. I don't fiddle with it. I don't. And I don't put any of these on it either. I took the opinion with the whole thing. These are the default settings. Let's see if it works. And if there's any pressing need to change them, then change them. But until that point, leave them alone. Of more significance to me was what things actually look like. So the theme is set to standard, but you can go to dark. So that's what it looks like, dark. And you've got this yin-yang thing, which is kind of 50-50, isn't it? I just have that set to standard. Although I don't dislike the dark bar on the left-hand side. Then you've got the sidebar on red count. Do you have that dark text, light text, etc.? So that's just set to dark. As I say, all of these are the default. The article list preview size is 3 lines. So if you look over at these, you have the image, that's there. You have the title, and then you have 3 lines of text before it tells you where it's from and the date and time. And that's set in here. So if you only wanted 1, that would shrink it down to 1. Or you could go to 10 if there is 10 in the preview. So I think 3 to 4 is a good compromise. Then you've got the font size. So you can make that bigger if you want, but I'm not quite that blind at the moment, but the day will come, trust me. And then where you have the list images. So automatically on the left, you can switch them to the right, which might make more sense. You can have them as a poster, so the whole thing is much, much bigger, but it gives you a much better image, or you don't even have to have any images at all. The default's the left, although I actually think they'd probably look better on the right. Shall I shift them to the right? That way, I think it's just easier. Mind you, see these dots, which are saying that it's unread, you would know it was unread anyway, because if you click on it, once you've clicked on it, it fades anyway. So you would know with or without it, but that's the options that you have. You even have different sizes of those, so you could keep making that a bit bigger. I don't see any need to have it much bigger than that. Right, there's options in here for the display data from the article. You can mark them as read while you're scrolling, which would mean I don't have to wait for the certain amount of time. You can even say how much you want these to be opaque. So if we go to 66%, look at the bottom, it's going much paler as we go, but the default is 50, so you could have that. Or you could even have it that it doesn't change, but you know it's red because it doesn't have the blue dot, which I think I'm used to having it 50%. I could live with that. Right, then you've got your options for reading it. So which view do you use? And this view that we're looking at here is the feed article. But there are other views. So there's this Mercury reader, there's the ARC 90, and there's actually the website article, and it's completely up to you. I've never changed that from the feed reader. There is a manual reader view, which is the Mercury view, and again you've got this ARC 90 thing. And then there's the actual font that's displayed, and again I've not made any changes to this, but you could change this if that's what you want. I'm looking at these and no, I've never changed any of those. Maybe I'm just boring, I don't know. Let me know. Right, and then you've got your behaviours. So this is where you dictate to the software exactly what you want it to do. So this marking it red after 2 seconds can be quite annoying if you want things to be marked as unread only when you don't want to see the story again. So one option's immediately, but you can take that up to 8 seconds or manually. So if you take it up to manually, what that means is when you click on this story, instead of that going to automatically dim and take away the unread item, it won't until you manually do it. Now, you have a menu item, and in here, the best thing in here is all of these shortcuts, and you'll see they're only one. They're only one character. And to mark something as read, you just hit R. So if I look at that and I think, yeah, I'm fine. I don't want to do anything with that. I just hit R, and then it marks it as read. And that way, I don't have to try and outrun the automatic mark it as read. So I had that set to 3. I think on my other machine I had that set to manually, and I just went through it manually, which I think I actually prefer, so I'll probably leave it set to manual. Right. This confirm mark all as read we've seen in action. That was when we were looking at MacBites, marooned at MacBites headquarters. And we said above 100 items you would be prompted for it. And indeed we were. But you could make that above 1,000, or you could say never. You know, if I use that confirm everything has been read, which is Command and D, I never want confirmation. And to be honest, I never do, because I know what I'm doing. So I would probably turn that off. Right, then what happens after you've marked all as read? And we saw this happen too. It selected the first item of the next feed. So we were down the bottom, we were in marooned, and it took us to the MacBites Podcast, the first unread item in there. So that's what it did in here. After you've cleared the red items, or what you want it to do, and it goes to select the next item. But you could have the first item, or you could have it do nothing. So this behaviours option in the preferences is where News Explorer comes into its own as far as I'm concerned, because an app like this isn't to do particularly with the aesthetics, it's more to do with functionally, I need this to become like an extension of me. I need it to react in the way that I need it to react to make using it fast, because it's information that you're passing in here, and that's one of the reasons why I've stuck with News Explorer. I know there's Reader and there was Mr. Reader as well, and they were lovely, but aesthetically fabulous, but not giving you this level of control. So it's the level of control that I prefer. You can hit enter on a list item and it will open it in a new window. So if we wanted to see this story from Apple in another window, we press enter and it opens it up in a totally separate window in here. So just if you wanted to do that and then move on to another story. Then we've got double clicking on a list item. So exactly what I did, but instead of pressing enter, you just double click it and they do the same thing. Again, you're just tweaking how the app actually works and responds. If you're in the timeline, what you want to do, and you can see this one is opening it in the current window, but you could choose what that does. So you could choose for that to open in a browser without actually having to hit the B key. So this is all workflow related. The whole thing is workflow related. Right, what we got down here? After you've closed all the windows, do you want to close the app? I probably would, so I'll do that. And I think I'm done with that. That leaves Twitter. For the Twitter feeds to work, you need to give it access via an API token, which I've already given it, so I don't know why it's saying account unknown. I wouldn't like to say, but it's working. So this is what it will download. So if I put a download in likes as well, anytime anything is liked, it will download that. It's actually a good way to read your own feed, but I hooked it up just with MacBites Siri. Then we've got the sharing. And the sharing that we talked about was that these ones were coming from the share system, which they are. That's why they're there. But you can, just in News Explorer, hide these if you want. If you're never going to want to share them to those ones, then you can turn them off by just taking the tick out. You've also got all of these other options, which I have turned off, because I'm never, ever, ever going to want to do any of those things with it. The big one for me was that one, to send it to Instapaper. So it's out of News Explorer. It goes into the second stage of how I would process information. And that's it for that one. And then you've got your advanced options. So do you want to enable JavaScript? That can be pretty dangerous, but I've left it be at the moment. I haven't done the private browsing thing. There's starting videos and audio manually, which I do want, because I'm subscribed to some podcasts and video things in here, and I don't want them automatically playing. You can clear the in-app browser cache and start again. And then you've got whether you auto-hide subscriptions and so forth with keyboard navigation. And there is a limit on how many articles it will fetch. I think they're thousands. That should be a comma, really, shouldn't it? Again, that's the default and I've left it be. Haven't done anything with the voiceover because I don't use it. Didn't need to do any diagnostics either. So it's the preferences in here, but particularly this behaviour one, that if you sit down with News Explorer and you start using it, there's something that just jars with you. And when I double click it, I want it to do something else. There will be a way to change that in here. And it is a fantastic way to consume information rather than the alternatives, which would be one, going out to the individual websites themselves, which would be time consuming. You're bound to forget one. But the other way, you know, most of the things I see in here, you would see on Twitter. But the problem on Twitter is it's then a different workflow to capture it, depending on what you want to do with it. Now, what you might want to do with it may be completely different to what I want to do with it, because I have stories that come in all week, and you can see on average there's probably about 3,000 of them. Some of them will make it to the next MacBites show. Some of them would be in after hours because there's an update to an app. Some of them would just go straight to the review of the year, and some of them are just to acknowledge, oh yeah, that got updated. But I wouldn't particularly be doing anything with it right now. So, for example, there was lots of stories that came out about the update to Numbers and Keynote, and the fact that one of the Keynote features only works on Monterey. Fabulous, because at the time it came out, we were weeks away from Monterey. But there's all these articles saying, oh, this is fantastic, and it only works in Monterey. Well, I can't do anything with that right now. I can't, but it would enter my workflow. I might favourite that. I might send it to Instapaper. I might do something with it based on the fact I'll be demonstrating that, but not until I've got a Monterey install to demonstrate it with. So it's all to do with your workflow and all to do with how you consume information. But I do think for Twitter, it's particularly good. We do have the podcast feeds. So if we go to the podcast, I've left this alone as well. For in here, this is why is 147 not there? Should we do a re-download and find why 148's missing from in here? There's 148. Johnny
says this is awesome. You've excelled yourself.
Oh, I'm glad you're enjoying it, Jonathan. So this is a good way. I mean, obviously you've probably got podcast readers. Whether you would choose to use that in your RSS feed, one way to do it would be just, well, I don't want to be distracted by what's in my podcast feed until I'm ready to listen to something, but then I don't want to miss anything either. So you could subscribe to it in your podcatcher, but you could subscribe to it in here so you're aware that there's a new show. Obviously, with our newfound scheduling capability, which has turned out to be totally amazing, hasn't it? Like, it's been every Tuesday for the last nearly 4 months. It's amazing. You know when it's coming. We're just an hour late this week. But, that's one of the things that you could do with it. So I could just clock the fact that that's dealt with. R to mark it as read. I could use these in here for the links. So if I'm looking for apps, it's a good way to use the links in there. It's a great way to mail us and contact us because these are live links. And then just mark it as complete. So I've done all of that. Obviously, we're subscribed in here for technical reasons. So like I'm saying, where did 148 go? I have no idea why that's missing. So I'm going to re-download it and make sure that it's there and everything is okay. So what we would do is we would check all of this. Is this right? Yep, looks good.
And Debbie S is loving it.
Oh, good. So you're all going to use RSS now. And I would just check that. Once I've given it a check through, I'd just hit and it's updated and we're sorted. And obviously I had the marooned one in there for doing exactly the same. I do have these in a podcatcher if I wanted to listen to them. But, by the time the show's released, I've probably heard it 3 times anyway. I don't need to hear it again. But let's have a look. If this has got 141 in it, one thing I was interested in, which I mentioned to you, is episode 58. Look at this, 10 years ago. Right, 58 was indeed the 17th of October 2011. And when we look at it, here you go, In Search of New Treasures. And that was indeed our live report from Liverpool on the release of the 4S. So if I wanted to listen to that, which I did, then I can go in here and I've got a play button at the bottom. And I'm not cluttering my podcatcher with old episodes from 10 years ago. But, it's relevant because now it's 10 years ago. And if you look at that, one thing that really made me laugh with this episode when I heard it the other day, one was the opening. It was where you did an intro and said that I drifted off.
Yes, I remember it well. And you were mental.
I went mental. We'd just done the iOS 5 thing. iOS 5. Wow.
Carol says, I've never understood RSS. You are so amazing.
Now you know why. I know why it's important. But yeah, we had a disaster. It got bricked. Do you remember? iOS 5 bricked it. So I had an iPhone 4 that was poorly. So it was a good job that MacBites Siri was arriving the next day to make everything work.
Oh, talking of iOS, I totally forgot my passcode for my work iPhone. So I had
In your defence, your work iPhone hasn't seen the light of day in 18 months.
It hasn't.
No.
Well, I only got it to make... videos and quick reference guides, but no, it's been sat in my bag, so I had to install iTunes onto my work laptop and then UKit, and then I was going to write this quick reference guide to install some software on the machine, on the phone. So it goes to the App Store and it says it needs iOS 14, I think. Anyway, it's an iPhone 6. It'll only take up to 12.
Oh dear, you're going to need a new one.
That's what I said.
Right, that's the feed that you need, Carol. So is that the feed that you're trying it with? That's the one that's working here. That is the one that's actually active. So it should be. And it's just a nice way to be able to go back. These aren't stored on your device. They're stored in our cloud. But it does mean that you can right-click, refresh it, pull the whole thing down, and listen to any show from whenever. That one was particularly funny. I actually emptied my handbag at the store, and it was. We gave a list of what was in it, and it was hysterical. I actually enjoyed listening to that show from 10 years ago, so I can highly recommend that one. And that's what I use it for and how I use it. So on a general weekday, what will happen is I'll be heading in here and, none of those are of any interest to me. I will work through every one of these. So I've now got this set that as I move, I need to press R on it to say I've read it. All right, I don't care how green they are. Don't care about that. And literally work through them. I will then end up with some favourites. Now the favourites, obviously, there's the event one here. And I just want to read that, look at it, or whatever, or something I might use down the line. This one for filing an appeal just had me rolling on the floor laughing, because 2 weeks before they said they'd won. And then they're appealing. So those are the kind of things that I favourite. And then when I've finished in here, so this one's probably the easiest one to finish with. Don't need anything on that one, or that one, or that one. We know all about that. That was interesting to me about discourse. So I would probably, to mark it as finished within here, I would favourite it with the F key, which has put the star at the top, and then R, so it's red. And it will still appear in favourites up here, so it'll be in there somewhere. But I'll be able to read that at my leisure, rather than in here with all of this. And I take this down to 0, and then honestly, within an hour, it's back up to like 200, and then I start again. That's how I work with it. But there's lots of different ways to work with RSS. A whole range of ways, depending on what you want from each one. It's a great way to keep up with tutorials from websites or videos from YouTube without going to YouTube and then being sidetracked because you're on YouTube. And that's how I use it. So anybody else got any questions on that?
Yeah, Kim's a bit confused as to which version to get.
Right.
The $9.99 or from the App Store for $4.99.
Mine's from the App Store, and I think that's historic. Now, when you say App Store, do you mean the Mac App Store? Mine's from the App Store. I don't know whether they weren't supplying it directly back in the day, but I took it from here. Let's have a look. Let's get this.
I think mine came from the App Store.
I don't think it was available direct at one point. It could well have been that.
I don't think I've got the iOS version.
Probably not, knowing Mike. $8.99. That one. So I got it from the App Store. Is there a direct version? Have we got their website? Go on, take me to their website. Not in here. Or don't then. You know, do what you like. Oh, I didn't know there was one for the Apple TV. How cool. Let's have a look. Let's not do that. Let's do News Explorer.
Can you get the RSS of just one page of a website?
Possibly not. It would depend on it. It would depend whether it's set up to do that.
Oh, that's what I was going to say.
Right, so let's have a look in here. If we do the buy now, what do we get?
Down to the website publisher. Brilliance.
Right, $9.99 for a personal license. Free with setup. Or this one. Right, this Universal Edition looks like it's for everything. This looks like it's a bundle. Whereas this one is just for the Mac version. Because if we look at what it runs on, so if you wanted it on everything, there is this download link to the App Store, which is cheaper. How bizarre. Right, I think I see the difference. Okay. This one here, let's get to that and not do that. That must be that one. This one is for the Mac App Store, and it's only for Mac OS. This one, if you look at the platforms, is for the phone, the iPad, the TV and the watch, but not for the Mac. So I must have got both. I must have got the mobile version, which is what this is, and I must have got the Mac version as well, because some people don't consume RSS on their desktop. In fact, I probably use it more on mobile, but I like having the desktop to sit and process it through. So the difference between those two, if those are the two you're referring to, that's for mobile devices and Apple TV, and the other one is for the Mac. So hopefully that answers the question. Okay. Oh, BBC football gossip. I don't think you can unless they provide you the ability to do that, because it just wouldn't get updated. There would be nothing coming through to do that. But hopefully you've got a few ideas now of how you might deploy RSS. It's a really good technology. Unfortunately, it's been left to geeks to use it, primarily because Google Reader made it available to everybody. And once Google Reader went, it was like 1% more difficult to use, and everybody stopped using it. And it was like, that's just so sad. If people couldn't use it easily, they just didn't bother. But it is a good way to consume information. And really, it's a good way to control your consumption of information. So you've not got this fire hose coming at you. You decide how often you want it updated and things. And the other alternative is like me. I wanted to listen to 58 and it was just easier to do it in there. If I was in my podcatcher and I wanted to listen to 58, I'd have to make it my business to go find it and then download this. And how do I download that without downloading all the ones in between? Whereas in here, I can just refresh the feed, which is text-based. So it's tiny, really tiny. So it does it fast. And then I just click play on the one show that I want to listen to. So it's great for me for research as well. So that is how I use it. Okay. Renee's setup is only for Mac, not iOS. Well, that's the problem with it. Obviously, they have an iOS subscription, but then I think that's all or nothing, isn't it? It's not an individual app. I would hope if you had the version of this from the App Store, it would synchronize with the setup version of it, but you'd have to check. That's not good. Not good. Debbie says, is there a link for Maroon? Not seeing it on the site. There is a link for Maroon.
I'm trying to find it. Yeah.
We used to have that at the end of the shows, didn't we? So, if I go into PowerPoint, that won't help me. That won't help me. Well, it will if it'll let me open a file, but it probably wouldn't, would it? So what I'll do is I'll go to the folder for PowerPoint, which is totally parrot and all organised, and it'll be in the archive. It'll be in, look at this, totally organised. It will be in here, and it would be before we finished. So this is 102 onwards. When's this? Oh, this is last year. Surely it must be in one of these. So I'll download that, which has taken me into PowerPoint, which means I need to come out of PowerPoint because now it's got upset. Right, where have you put it? Go on, where have you put it? Oh, you haven't opened it, you naughty, naughty thing. Right, now it's opened it. And it always used to be at the end, didn't it? So this is January, and we were being marooned. There you go. So down here we have a marooned, and I said it's not the nicest link, but I can get it to you. There we go. There's the marooned link. This is why all your files need to be organised like that, Mike. Not that Mike's files are ever organised like that, but mine are organised so I can at least find them. Why do I bother organising them like that? And that's because when I go into what I'm working on, which is the projects in here, they get in the way, and my files, like this one's today, there's too many of them. So I then archive them properly in a sub-parod system. Oh, but that's for another day on file organisation, isn't it? But there you go. There's the link. Okay, let's get rid of that. Right. And let's get back to where we were over here, which was there, I do believe. That's where we were. Awesome. Right, so an update to numbers. The update, the primary driver here, it's got radar charts, which we looked at a couple of weeks back, but it's also got pivot tables. But before we get as far as pivot tables, we need to understand how numbers works, as to why it hasn't had pivot tables before. So the update in question that we're talking about is the 11.2 update. It says it's got improved filters, which is fine. But it's also got powerful pivot tables and radar charts. So radar charts we've looked at. Powerful pivot tables we are looking for. But before we talk about pivot tables, we need to understand how numbers works. Because if it worked the same as Excel, they would probably have been there already. But up to now, any time somebody has said, who's trying to come from Excel to numbers, and they've mentioned pivot tables, they've had one word thrown back at them, which is categories are where it's at. That's not strictly true, but categories is what it has had up to now. And to an untrained eye looking at that, you might think, looks like a pivot table. It kind of does, but it's not a pivot table. So we now have fully fledged pivot tables. I'm going to get us up to the point that we've looked at a pivot table. And then next time, Mike's going to try and break it, aren't you? Oh, pivot table boy is going to try and break it. But let's have a look what we've actually got up to now. So the first concept to understand is numbers itself, which is you go into numbers and you're going to make a new file. And it doesn't matter which file type you try and create. You've got basic files, so blank, you've got a dark blank, you've got tables and charts, pivot table basics, we will be returning to that. You've got templates in here, but it really doesn't matter what you try and create. There is an underlying aspect that you need to understand for any of these to make any kind of sense whatsoever. So I'm just going to start with probably the most basic one you can have, which is blank. And we'll do a comparison between this and Excel. So this is as basic as it gets. You have one sheet, and within that, you've got your table. And this is indeed a table within sheet 1. It can move. If I had another sheet, there's sheet 2, and I delete that, sheet 2 is totally blank. But I can take the table from sheet 1, cut it and paste it onto sheet 2. Now, this might not sound mind-blowing, but it is if you think about how Excel works, which is nothing like that. So let's get a blank workbook in Excel. And while they might look the same, Excel has a sheet. And within the sheet, it's actually a worksheet. We have the cells. There is no concept of anything behind the cells that you have in there. You can't take this sheet and paste it onto another sheet. You can duplicate the sheet, but the cells themselves are locked into the sheet. So if we put that on the right-hand side and we put this on the left-hand side, that is the fundamental difference between the two. The tables in here can be moved. You can also add another table. So we could add one down here, table 2. They exist within the same sheet, the same space. You could put them side by side. So if we change the zoom, obviously we're working quite small here, but if we did this, nothing to stop us grabbing that and putting them side by side. So as far as I was concerned, when I saw numbers for the first time, it was like, oh, this is like Excel, but better. And I meant better in terms of layout, that I can create a really customized layout in numbers, whereas with Excel, I have to work around those cells. There's no option but to work around those cells because I can't do anything with them. Does that mean you can't get a really complicated layout done in Excel? Well, no, it doesn't. You can. But you have to work a heck of a lot harder. So you see how easy it is within here to put one table next to another and move them around. The data in this table can refer to the data in the second table. No problem at all. Even if that table isn't on that sheet. Even if it's on that sheet. But in terms of pure raw power, Excel's where it's at. So in terms of what you can do with layout in Excel, well, you're not completely stymied. So let me show you a file that I've got where layout's important. So it's got 6 sheets and it's a live working file, this. It's called the Gift Aid Master. Gift Aid is where in the UK, if you're a taxpayer and you donate money to the church or any other charity, you can claim back. Well, actually, you can't. You've paid so let's say you've donated, or you've earned £1,000, and the tax on that you're paying is 20%. If you donate that £1,000 to the charity, they can claim back from the government the 20% that you have paid in tax. That's the rule. But how you have to go about that as the charity can be quite arduous in terms of organisation. So that's why we have this for when we used to do the church count. Obviously, who wants to touch cash? Other people have touched COVID. But back in the day, that's what we did. You can see we started it in 2017. So this is an Excel spreadsheet. And while this doesn't look gripping, this is where I put the variables. So if this was for this coming Sunday, it would be the 17th of October. And you put the church name in there. So shall we put our MacBites church? Right. That just gives us a little bit of flexibility in terms of the rest of this spreadsheet. So this is a variable sheet. And I could hide that, but I need to interact with it. So it's the first sheet. The next step of this process is that people put money in envelopes, and the envelopes all have numbers on. So we need to know how much was put in each envelope. So they're put in order, and then Mike reads them out to me. So he'd be saying there's £10 in that one and there's 25 in that one. They didn't come to mass, but there was 50 in that one, and so forth. This is how we go about it. All the way down to all of the people. So I think it's about 170 odd, 90 odd, 200. Right, 200 envelopes. And that creates a total. But that would be useless in terms of printing it out. But we do have a breakdown. And this is money. This is what's in envelopes. And this is cash that's put in there. So we call it the plate, but it's like the basket. And then the gift aid will pull through to here. And we get totals. But all of that is input. That's why they're green. But the gift aid sheet needs to look a certain way. The alternative to doing what I'm going to show you is having to use a pen and a piece of paper and a calculator, and it takes 4 hours. We're in and out in 45 minutes, and this spreadsheet is why. So this gift aid sheet needs to look like that. And you can see the money that I've put in from the envelopes has come through. Why don't we just type it in here, you're thinking? Because this is hideous. We need a subtotal for the first 27 and then the next 27 and so forth. And there's too much scope for putting the wrong amount in the wrong column. It's much easier to just have that. And it will take that and it will fill that with it. Then we have to have a sheet that is kept, and I think it's actually, it might be sent with it even, that needs to look very different. So if you look here, our MacBites Church has come through from the first page, but this has to have checkboxes, it has to have cash filled in from here, it has to have all these declarations, that needs to be calculated, and that is my signature. And we have to keep these sheets. Okay. So, and then we have a paying in breakdown. There's our MacBites Church coming through, so that's going to need to be a bit bigger, isn't it? But this is paying it in at the bank. That gets filled in automatically, and then we just put it in the paying in book. The two sheets that are critical is this one and this one. And they would have been well easier to do in numbers, but for reasons we can't remember, they had to be done in Excel. But just to give you an idea in terms of layout, that when I say numbers is easier, it doesn't mean Excel can't do it. These two sheets are that. So if I hit the print key and we get a PDF of that, which we will put in our data file as 001, and we get this one and do exactly the same. So again, it's going to be a PDF, and this one is just going to be 002. They do actually, despite the fact on there that they look like spreadsheets, they do actually look perfect when we come to print them out. So there's one. Absolutely perfectly prints to A4. But you've seen it in Excel and it's all automatically calculated. Everybody else calculates that by hand, which is why it takes them 4 hours. And that's the second one. And again, it totally perfectly prints to an A4 sheet. So it can be done in Excel, it's just a lot more complicated. So when you're thinking about Excel and numbers, remember that numbers has this canvas, and that impacts how it can work with pivot tables and data. Right, so that's the first fundamental principle. There are other things that numbers has, but in relation to what we're talking about, the first thing that it had, and it's had this since the beginning, if we go into new and we hit on categories, this is how it works. And I would forgive you for thinking that that looks like a pivot table, but it's not a pivot table. It is a table that has had categories applied to it. Now, for reasons best known to themselves, this is supposed to be the tutorial file. That doesn't tell me much. There's no information, there's no text, there's no explanation, there's 2 blank columns. What are they thinking? I've no idea. I really do have no idea. But that's what they've given you. And when you click inside this, being a table on that sheet, if we look across over here, we have format, which you can toggle on and off, and we have organize. And when you click on organize, it's showing you that you have categories deployed. And at the moment, we have them grouped by name. So Andy and Chloe. And we can fold those up. And this does indeed look a little bit like a pivot table. But it's the poor man's pivot table. And I had a question regarding this, which was, why does it look like that when this is supposed to be the tutorial? You're not telling me anything. But you can turn the categories off. So that's really what the table would look like. That would be your raw data. So we have Andy in the first bit, we have Chloe in the second, and then we have the item numbers, and then we've got the amount. This is not my spreadsheet, this is numbers sample spreadsheet. So having clicked in the table to select the table, which is why I've taken time to explain about tables living on a canvas and not a worksheet in a workbook. Tables are one level lower than that. But once it's selected, prior to the pivot tables, you used to turn on categories, and it created a group for you, and it's saying show group for name and show it by value, which is the sum over here. So this, you could choose something else. You have the item, you have the name, you have column C and column D, and that's where I'm like lost. Why are they blank? That's useless. And you've got the amount. So at the moment, it's by name. It doesn't really make much sense to do anything else. But you can carry on adding categories if you want. So to make this much easier to work with, let's get rid of that entirely. And that's not good because I can't see the end of the page. So I can't hit the button. Never mind. We'll just open up a new one. I have one for categories, which is exactly the same information, but for the fact that I have put in a quantity and I've put in an item. So I filled C and D. Now we've got more information, the categories make much more sense. So at the moment, there's no categories. But if I wanted to categorize this to ask a question, and that's the whole point of pivot tables, you're asking a question. How many hand washes did we sell? What was the amount in value of soap that we sold? So let's say, how many hand washes did we sell? I can answer that. I don't need a pivot table. I don't need categories. It's easy. Hand wash. Hand wash. Right. There's only 2. And the sum is shown at the bottom, 17 units of hand wash. That's fine. If I wanted wipes, well, that's wipes and that's wipes. So there's 70 units. I don't need either for this to work. But can you imagine instead of 10 items, you had 10,000? Yeah, now you're going to need some way for this to be automated. And that's where categories and pivot tables came in. So in terms of categories, you would turn that on. And again, it's showing it you by person because that was the default. So if I change person to item, we can now see that we have soap separate from hand wash, separate from wipes. So this is somewhat similar to a pivot table. So why did Apple bother adding pivot tables? And the answer to that was that this can only do one thing at a time unless you really get complicated with it in the categories. And of course, you have to set this up to answer questions that you have, whereas a pivot table can give you information that you don't already know that you need to ask questions about. The classic example was many years ago with Microsoft, and they they were putting in systems in places, and they noticed that there was an anomaly in the data. So in June of this particular year that they were looking at this data, there was a huge increase in the same transaction in people buying beer and nappies, only in June. And they couldn't work out what it was. And it was only it was in certain countries. But so it was replicated across multiple countries, but not every country, and only in June. And the question was asked, what was that? You wouldn't ask that of the data. The data will give you that information. You then need to work out what that means. What it actually meant was, remember, they were the same transaction. Men were going to supermarkets and the ladies were asking for one thing, which was nappies. I've no idea why. And the men were buying beer. And why were they buying beer? Because it was a World Cup. So this was a pattern that repeated every 4 years. And they couldn't work out what it was until somebody gave them the missing piece of information. But you wouldn't ask that question. And a pivot table, you don't need to ask every question. If there's an anomaly, you will see it, and you will then ask the question. So a pivot table tells you the question to ask, whereas these categories can't really do that. So that's why they've decided they're not bothering with that anymore. We go back to File and New, and they now have pivot table. So what Apple do in here to try and guide you through features is give you a template that has basically a little tutorial in it. So there's one for tables and charts, and there's one for the pivot tables. There's a charts basic one, and there's a categories one. And I think down here there's a couple of others as well. But we are interested in this new one, which is the pivot table basics. And when you open that, and we'll take that full screen, it does give you a little bit of information and a tutorial. So there's two sheets in here. One is guiding you through it, and the other one is letting you have a play with it without damaging this data if you need to come back and start again. Obviously, if you do get totally confused and break the thing, you can always just say File New and make it again. But this is the first table, which has the data table below, which is shown with this circle. And it also has this pivot table, which has a different symbol to show you it's a pivot table. They are both completely independent of the canvas in the background, because that's how Numbers works. The second one is for you to practice with. So if you've inserted a pivot table and you've not set up any data with it, it'll look like this. That's what it will look like. But we will go back to here and have a look at it. So what it's telling you is that you can analyse and summarise the data in your pivot table. It's actually better than I was expecting, and I think it's safe to say it was better than you were expecting. We thought it was going to be one of Apple's fudges, but actually no. So what's happened here is this bottom bit is the data. So in January, there's no particular dates, it's just January sales and February sales and March sales. We have a product that was sold, and some were manual and some were electric. And there is a number of units sold, and then there is revenue generated from those units sold. That's our raw data. Obviously, there's not that much data yet again that it matters in terms of making a pivot table. Why would it matter? If we wanted to know how many, what would this, let's have a look what we got. The revenue from, no, not revenue, the units sold for electric bikes. Then we could say that's electric, that's a bike, select it. That's a bike, that's electrical, select it. And literally go through the entire thing like that. There's another sale of that. And that comes to 1,222. If we look at our pivot table though, that information is there automatically without us having to manually go through the data. And that's why we have a pivot table, to answer questions like that. Obviously, the pivot table is going to be the way to go with this because it can give you other data without you having to change anything about the table. So I now know from the bottom table that there was a grand total of 1,222 electric bikes. But if I now needed to know, what about manual scooters, I'd have to start again. Now it can be done because scooters, manual. Scooters, manual. And I'm making a selection there. Scooters, manual. 1000, is that right? 1021. And that's right because that figure's there. But from me doing that manually, you should be able to see the value of a pivot table. All of that information is there straight away without you having to do anything or change anything. So you've got this practice thing to start with, and how it works, it knows it's a pivot table. So you select the pivot table. You again have the format options, which is the table and the arrangement. So this is to do with what it looks like. You also have the organize option, but now the organize option is not showing you the same thing at all. The organize option is showing you pivot information because it's a pivot table and not categories. It's a proper pivot table. And at a minimum, it needs you to add something that's a value to that. So maybe the total of sales or something like that, or dates or products or power or units. It needs something in there. These are the elements you have to add. You have 5 of them, and they marry up with the columns that you have at the bottom. And you have 3 different places that you can put them. And the little diagram actually shows you that that's the columns, these are the rows, and these are the values. So if we were trying to replicate what we had in here, which was dates across the top and then power and then product, what I can do is take, oh no, we don't want you. Can't turn that off, it's a pain in the backside. Right, I've taken a screenshot of that and that will hover around here. And I can go in there and we can try and replicate it. So in the middle, it has units. So if we take the units and drag that into the values, then we get one value, which is correct. We look at what that was in here, we just don't have the detail because we have nothing in the columns and the rows. So in the columns, if we add the date to the column, then we separate it out by the date. If we then put something else in the rows, so if we put power in the rows and then product in the rows as well, we actually replicate with just a few drag and drops what they had already built for us on sheet 1. So it's that simple to actually create. Now that's very, very basic. And obviously it's using this basic file just to give you an overview of how that can actually work. I would argue it makes much more sense with pivot tables to use data that you need to ask questions of and to use more data. The only benefit with using so little data is that you can manually check if it's right or not. So if you are learning this from the very beginning, then that's great. But if you need to take that a little bit further with your own data, that's where next week will come in when I'm handing over to Mr. Pivot Table himself to use your own data in it, aren't you? Excellent. So that's going to be part 2 next week. But hopefully that's given you at least an idea of the fact it is actually very good. It's a very good implementation in Numbers, and we're going to have a little mini-series on it. Right, let's have a look what was going on in here then. Oh, it's over to you, isn't it, Mike, for the data model? Are you raring to go?
No, not yet.
Oh, poor Mike.
Just give me a minute. Need to clear this thing off my screen that I was checking out for Tony.
I foresee Carol could use this in Numbers for book sales. Let's look on the optimistic side, Carol. Book sales. That's what we need.
Okay, I'm ready.
Excellent. I nearly passed over to a webcam there.
Oh.
Nobody wants that, Mike. Nobody wants that. Right. There we go. There's Mike.
Oh, thank you. Right. Okay. Part 2 of the data model today. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into SQL Server, which is a database. But I have the database actually installed on my Windows machine. So you can get this free app called SQL Express, and it basically allows you to run a SQL Server database on your machine, which I just use for testing purposes. So I'm going to go into there, the SQL Server Management Studio. This will turn into Excel eventually, by the way. And the database, the server is called SQL Express. So I'm going to connect to it. Within that server, there is a database called Employees. And within that database, there is a table called Employees List. And it's telling me there's an update available, but I don't want to install that right now. Now, if I right click on that and select the top 1,000 rows, it will just show you what the data is, because I just want you really just to see the data we're dealing with. There's actually 30,000 rows in here, and what I want to do is get this data into Excel, because SQL Server, like any database, is great at storing data, but it's not so hot when it comes to building reports, charts, pivot tables, etc, etc, etc. So I need to take this data and get it into Excel. So I'll shut that down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run Excel, start a new workbook, and go to Data, Get Data from Database from SQL Server Database. I will need to give it the name of the SQL Server database, which is win10/SQL Express. I'll spell that correctly. Yes, I have. Click OK. It goes and interrogates that database, and it finds, well, that server, and finds there's actually two databases on there. There's Employees and there's Northwind, which is the database that comes with SQL Server and also comes with Access. So I'm going to choose that database there, expand it, and select Employees List. That's the name of the table within that database. And there is the data, but it just gives me a preview. Now, if I was to click load, what that will do is take the 30,000 rows of data that are in that table in the SQL Server and import that into the spreadsheet. So you'll end up with 30,000 rows of data in the spreadsheet. You might be thinking, is that a problem? Because Excel can handle, theoretically, and I say theoretically, just over 1 million rows. That's how many rows there are in a worksheet. But in the real world, Excel can possibly handle 30,000 rows of data. I have seen Excel choke up at about 50,000 rows of data. I know that people at work have done an export from our HR system, 50,000 rows, and it's just slowed Excel down to a crawl where you get the not responding message. You get to the point where you want to pick the laptop up and throw it out of the window. So yes, in theory, Excel can handle that much data and more, but in the real world, it's not really designed to store that much data in the spreadsheet. So that's why that's one of the reasons that Microsoft came up with the concept of the data model. Last week I showed you that the data model is there to create to allow you to create pivot tables from linked tables, and that was the original idea behind it. But even if you only want to deal with one table, if you've got a lot of data, stick that data in the data model, because the data model can support millions and millions and millions of rows without having a negative impact on performance. Just having a quick look, see if there's any questions. I don't think so, no. Patricia says choking up spreadsheets are not a good thing. They certainly aren't, Patricia, no. They are a bad thing, like bad words. So I'm not going to click load. Instead, I'm going to click the drop down arrow and select load to. And this gives me more options. I don't want to leave the default setting of table, because that will load the data into the spreadsheet, which, as I've just explained, I want to avoid. So I'm going to change the option to only create connection. And what that will do is that will create a connection between this Excel file and the data source, which in this case is the SQL Server database. But the really important option you've got to tick is that option there, add this to the data model.
Question.
Okay, let me go and see the question. Why the SQL Server to import the data? That's where the data was stored, Tony. So your data can be stored anywhere. Your data could be stored in a web page, which I'm going to show you in a minute. Your data could be stored in a SQL Server database, particularly if you're talking about corporate data. So with a typical company who are dealing with large amounts of data, sales data, financial transactions data, HR data, production data, that kind of stuff, the data is stored in usually an Oracle database, an SQL database, because those are what I would call professional grade enterprise level databases. It's a bit too over the top for your small business or your home use. For that, you'd either use Microsoft Access, or you can't use Bento or IP anymore. FileMaker, that's still going, isn't it, on the Mac?
It is.
Yeah. I can't think of any others on the Mac.
No, it's not big on databases.
No. So that's what SQL Server is for. Access would be the same. I would say that Access is like as a concept, it's a cut down version of SQL Server. They're both made by Microsoft, but different audiences. So Access, you can use Access for a small team. We actually used to use Access to store all our booking information in it for our team at work. But if you outgrow that and you want to upscale it to a sort of corporate solution, then go for SQL Server. If you're going to go down the Microsoft route, Oracle, if you want an alternative, even MySQL, if you are looking for like a free option.
Access is good for rapid prototyping, though.
It is.
Because there's no external dependencies. So if you're trying to model something and get maybe sign-off for a bigger investment to build it, Access is self-contained. So crank it up on your desktop, create what you want, and then explain to them how you would need to deploy that on an enterprise level system. But they can actually see the entire thing working, which often is needed.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about that year 2000 bug issue that I fixed with an Access database.
Well, that's a good one, that. Can you load from Amazon's KDP data? You can probably get, I'll check it in a minute, Patricia, you can probably get a connector for that. I'm not sure if it is there natively, though. Which I think it is. I think it is natively in Power BI, because one of the projects I've been working on at work has got data stored on Amazon, and they're pulling data live into Power BI. But you may have to download it into a CSV file first, rather than doing it natively. But I'll check in a second. But getting back to this, you've got to make sure that you tick this add to the data model, because if you don't, the data won't end up in the data model. The data will end up nowhere if you actually just leave it as only create connection. So all you're going to do with that, if you don't tick that, but you do select that, is you're just going to create a connection to the database from this file, which is fine if you actually want to create pivot tables from the data in the database. So let me actually just show you that. I'll leave that set to only create a connection. I won't tick add to the data model. I'll click OK. That creates a connection to the SQL database. And if I wanted to create a pivot table, I can say create a pivot table from external source, choose the connection, choose the query called employee list. The query is basically the link between this Excel file and the SQL database. And then once I've done that, I actually get all of my column headings that are in the SQL database. So I could actually create a pivot table, let's say salary, where's my salary? Annual salary, there it is. So I could create salary per department, where I'm building the reports in Excel, but the data just lives in the database. It doesn't even live anywhere in this Excel file. So that actually is quite a good way to do it. If you don't even want to bring in your 30,000, 50,000, 100,000 rows of data into here, you can just connect directly to the data source, whatever data source that is. So in this particular case, the data source was a database. And there's lots of different databases that are supported. Can you connect directly to Amazon? There are online services, but it doesn't look like Amazon is amongst them. But you can probably get a connector to do it. That connector may cost you, it may be free, Patricia. So the data has not been loaded into Excel. The data lives in the database, but I can build pivot tables from that data and then build charts from that pivot table. So you might be thinking, well, why do I then want the data in the data model at all? There's lots of things that you can do with the data model. So I'm going to show you those. But first of all, I need to get the data into the data model. So I'll do data, get data from database, from SQL Server database. Then, as I did before, I need to put in the name of the server, which is win10/SQL Express. And then once I've done that, I just need to choose the database and the table. Go back to the arrow and load to, and choose only create a connection. So if I'm choosing only create a connection to avoid actually getting the data loaded into the spreadsheet cells, because that's inefficient. Although Excel, as I said before, although Excel can physically handle 1 million rows, actually storing 30, 40, 50,000 rows of data in the spreadsheet is going to cause you problems. So create a connection and add the data to the data model. Now the only difference now is that the data is in this file. Now it's not in the spreadsheet part of the file, it's in the data model part of the file, which you get to by clicking on data and then that green button there. And that opens up the data model, and there it's a 30,000 rows of data. Okay, so the great thing about the data model is it is optimized for storing huge amounts of data, and the data is stored in a compressed format. So although you have got 30,000 rows of data, because they're not stored in the spreadsheet part of the file, they're stored in the data model part of the file, it is not going to cause you any performance problems. So it's all about where to store the data. Now you might say, well, why didn't we just do what we did before? Because the data was quite happily stored in the database, didn't even touch this Excel file, and I could create my pivot table. So why even bother bringing the data into this Excel file at all? The reason is that there might be things that you need to do to that data that you can't do any other way. So let's say, for example, I wanted to show everybody's age. So I can't show their age in the database, because I don't have permission to go into the database and create a new column that will take basically today's date minus the date of birth and give us everybody's age. Or maybe I want to calculate the monthly salary. So maybe I want a pivot table that shows each country and the monthly salary. And the problem I've got is the data, which I will show you, which you've just seen actually, the data only has the annual salary. And I don't have the permissions to go into the database and create a calculated column that will just take annual salary and divide it by 12. So the only way that I can manipulate the data for my report is to do it in the data model. So that's why the data has been loaded into the data model rather than just creating a simple connection and leaving the data sitting where it was. All right, so if I go back into the data model, I'm going to create a new column by double clicking on the heading that says add column. I'm going to call the column monthly salary, and then I'm going to create a formula which will simply divide the annual salary by 12. So I will just type in there annual salary, which is the name of the column. I only need to type the first 2 or 3 characters. It appears in an autocomplete list. Double click on it. Annual salary divided by 12. Press enter. That will then give me the monthly salary of all the employees. It does look like they're all on the same salary, but actually if I scroll further down, we have got some people on different salaries here, which means that we've got different monthly salaries here. I wouldn't be able to do that unless I brought the data into the Excel file, either into the data model or into the spreadsheet. And I've already established that dumping 30,000 rows of data into the spreadsheet is going to cause you performance problems. Let's say I wanted to create another column called bonus, and the column, not end bonus, the column is going to be based on the appraisal. So what I will do there is create a formula that says if the last appraisal rating is greater than 3, and the last appraisal rating is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So basically if it's 4 or 5, so if the last appraisal rating is greater than 3, then what is going to go into this new column is the word bonus. Otherwise, what's going to go into there is no bonus. So each employee will either have the word bonus or no bonus appearing in this column, and it's going to be based on their appraisal rating. So you can see all these people have got an appraisal rating of 5, so they're getting a bonus. But anyone who's got an appraisal rating of 3 or 2 or 1 is going to have a no bonus. And again, the only way to actually create that column, which I need for my pivot table, otherwise there's no point creating it if you don't actually need it. The only way to do that would either be to store the data in the spreadsheet and build the extra column with a normal if function, or store the data in the data model and build the extra column with an if function. There's no way I could build that column in the database because I don't have access to it. So let's close down the data model window and then create a pivot table. Insert pivot table from data model. And here is all the columns from the table in the data model, including the new columns, monthly salary and bonus. So what I'll do here is I'll drag in a location, and I will drag in annual salary, and I will drag in monthly salary, and I will drag in bonus. So what that is showing us is that's showing us for each country the budget for the salaries broken down by country with a grand total at the bottom. Then we've got the salaries for each month, and then we've got the no, I don't want the bonus. I'll do that as a different pivot table because that's not actually showing us anything. So let's build another pivot table. It's like you said before, if you're going to build a pivot table, you want it to show you meaningful data. So drag bonus into there and drag employee number into there, and that tells us out of our 13,000 employees how many people are going to get a bonus and how many people aren't going to get a bonus. But all that was possible because the data was stored in the data model, so I could create my calculated fields. All right, so that is it from me. Unless you want me to carry on.
No, I'm fine. I just need one title on this slide.
Right.
And it's being awkward.
Oh, okay.
It's being awkward.
Being awkward.
But I can deal with that.
Shall I do another example then?
No, it's fine. It's
okay.
fine. Or we won't get round to the unboxing. And the unboxing's rather cool. Well, fingers crossed for the unboxing. Right, let me get rid of this. That's what I need to get rid of. Oh, and all the other detritus I need to get rid of. Right, okay. And do you look all right? Not totally. Why do your slides look all right when you start and then not before you finish? Oh, it's misbehaving. Crying out loud. Go on, just behave.
Just seeing a question there from Barbara. I've moved to Airtable for data where I need to make queries. Found it a good alternative to Access. I can run it all on my Mac.
Yeah, we haven't looked at Airtable, have we?
That was a comment, not a
We looked at
question.
Notion. Notion can do quite a lot with data. But would I use it instead of Access? I don't think I would. But that could just be me.
Yeah, I think, Barbara, you can copy over the SQL.
Right, let me get this running so we can actually see what's happening here. Oh, I would love to see what's happening. Things are nodding off. Right, let's do that and do that. And hopefully you can see my screen, because we're moving on to mastering Scrivener. And it's part 11, believe it or not. But we're starting compile, so it's compile part 1. Right, we've got, I hope we have a basic overview of compile. Let me know in the chat what you would be compiling to. And what I intend to show over the next 4 to 5 weeks are all the things that I compile to. I'm going to start off very basic, and that's because if you've used Scrivener for a while, I would suggest much of your time is spent creating in Scrivener. And it's only when you come to the end part that you need to compile. Does that mean you don't need to think about compile until the end? No, because when you're starting with an application, and this could be any application to do anything with, you need to think, can it do what you want at the end? So, for example, when we discussed, I think this was on MacBites, but I think I've talked about it on After Hours. When this time last year, Keynote decided to eat my slides, PowerPoint was one of the alternatives. So, where do I start evaluating whether that is doable or not? And you may think, well, can you make a presentation at the beginning? Is there a template? Can you add the shapes? Is the text supported? But no, I dived straight in and said to Mike, let's just throw something on a slide, on a series of slides, and let's present it. And if I can't present it effectively online, that's not going to work. And no matter what else it can do prior to that, it's irrelevant. So I don't want to waste my time looking at slides and masters and styles and duplicating and all that kind of stuff. If I cannot effectively present it, I can't use it. And compile is like that. If you're thinking of writing something in Scrivener, if you can't compile it, don't bother. If it will not compile in the way you need it, in the output you need, then don't bother. But luckily, ever since version 1, it's been more than capable of compiling to virtually any format you like. However, version 3 brought a completely new compile with it. And you either loved it or you loathed it, because it kind of hid a lot of the advanced stuff, which was great for users who were prepared to use the compile settings within Scrivener, but not great if you wanted something more customized. But if you've never used anything other than Scrivener 3, it'll be irrelevant. If you have, it's a matter of forgetting everything that went before and looking at what we have now and working with it. And I think you'll find that it's more powerful. So let me know in the chat if you worked with it before. So what have we got in here? Carol wants an ebook. Excellent. Compile into a course format. I discussed it once. You were blown away. Yeah, I have done that. That is one of the things that I use. Travel journal as an ebook with photos and videos. Ooh, that's going to push it, isn't it? But that's a great example. Right, awesome. I can see where we're heading with that. I can use those as examples. But the thing to remember at this point is that this new compile, if you have used a previous version, is going to be quite different. The good news is, why is that mouse moving and not moving where it should do? Oh, it's not moving off the screen. It's playing with my mind. Crying out loud. Right, I think I've got it under control. If you have used it before and you've got a compile from version 2 and you're happy with it, the odds are it'll work in 3. As long as you don't want to make any changes. But what I'm going to do is show you where we get all of these compiles from initially. So let's go in here. This file that we've been using throughout this series is called demo blank for a reason. Why are you not doing that either? There we go. It was called demo blank so I could show to you that when we come to compile, the template matters a lot. Because one of the things that's included with the template, in addition to content in the binder, is the compile settings that you have. Also related, there is content in the binder that is used in compile that isn't there depending on the template you chose. So all of this is now pulling together. Compile is where it all pulls together. So first of all, I'll show you in here that if we go into File, Compile, and that's one shortcut key that's worth remembering, Command, Option and E, what we have in here depends on what we've created and what shipped with it. So we've looked at the 3 parts of this last week. Just as a quick reminder, these are compile formats. They're a series of instructions that tell the compile engine what to do with the data that you pass to it. How does it need to look? And we have quite a few different formats available. The second part of that, which is this bit here, is that's definitely not what we want. It's that one. All right. First one, formats. Second one, section layouts. This is where you get very detailed with the layout. And then the last option here are all the custom options that you can tweak. And those 3 parts of this work together. And you may think 1, 2, 3, but there's actually another bit, which is this bit at the top. So there's 4 things that you are juggling with in the compile layouts. In the dialog box, what you compile for in terms of a format determines what's available in the formats, the section layouts and the extras. So depending on what you choose up here, you get different options. So if I click this, I lose an option over here. I lose all of these Scrivener formats. So if there's something that you think, I swear that was there last week, if it's not, go in here and make sure that you've got the correct thing selected in here. So if I'm printing it, physically printing it, I've got all of these formats. But if I have this set to go to Word, for example, that one's not too bad. There's quite a few things in there. But to an EPUB, you lose content. To some of these others, you will lose content. Because the compile for is the very first thing you need to set. If you go through all of the other options and then change this top one, you could not lose what you've got, but you wouldn't be able to use it because it's not relevant to the output that you have selected. So the very first thing to think about is the output that you select. It defaults to print most of the time. I definitely have some to PDF. I have some to plain text, and I have some to a web page or Markdown. I very seldom send it through to Word. but I would do if I needed to send a manuscript to a publisher for them to review it, then I would. So it's a matter of getting the first thing right in here before you go any further. So I'll set it to print, and that should give us a long option in here that we can then look at. So at the top, we have default. That is as basic as you can get. Completely basic. You will also see with that PDF is very similar, because whether you print it physically to paper or you print it to PDF, it's as basic as it gets. You can make a few changes, but it is as basic as it gets. When we were demoing this, I created a format that only exists inside this file. Hence, project formats. They are unique to the projects. So if you have a project, so we've got one, Brilliant Sigma saying medium articles should be simple to compile. Yeah, you could use HTML for that. If you were writing in Markdown, you could choose Markdown to HTML for that, and it would be relatively easy. But if you wanted that output, if there are any tweaks you wanted with it, then you could create a project format. How do you decide whether you want a project format or a Scrivener format, and what's the difference between the two? Well, a project format only exists in this particular project. A Scrivener format exists at Scrivener level. You might think that's great, then that would be available any time I open any project, but some compile options are not relevant at that point. So for example, if we come out of that and go into the email generator, so these were the ones we sent this week, there's a reminder. If you want that to compile, you're going to need a special compile so that this looks like a button and this looks like it's supposed to look. In fact, let's get a longer one. Let's do the announcement. How about that? Because there's loads in that. There's images in it. There's all kinds of stuff in it. Right. So that's a long mail, but I need that to compile and look right. This file is the email generator. So file compile. And I have project formats. I've got the default. I've got project formats. I've got Scrivener formats. These are showing because I'm at this point compiling for plain text. These are showing because these are dedicated compile settings to create an email. And I only ever need them in this file. That's why they're not cluttering up the Scrivener formats. I only ever need them in this file. And they're not actually that complicated in terms of what we can see in front of us. The format has a title. Then there is a section layout. It's fairly basic because it's text. It's just plain text that's coming out. And this is fairly basic. It's the current selection, which is one document, one scrivening. I have not put anything other than the default in here. I have removed annotations and I've removed trailing white space, but not mind-blowing, is it? And I've got there's no replacements going on either. So it's fairly basic, this. So how's it actually working? Well, when I go into it, so in here you can add custom compiles or you can manage the compile. So if I go in and I edit this compile, all of the information that you're looking at now used to be available in the previous dialog box, which was why the compile settings were like, oh, good grief, because you were overwhelmed by all of this. Once all of this is set, you never need to touch it again. But what exactly is in here? And this is the detailed part of compile. For a start, it needs a format name. So this is going to generate a MacBites mail. Where do you want to save it to? And what we're talking about saving is not the content. We're talking about saving the compile instruction. And I want that to be set to project formats, meaning it's available only in this project. The alternative is my formats that's available globally. But no, it's going to project formats. The very first thing I need to tell it is what format are we talking about? So if text is selected, these are our different options. They are exactly the same options as we had in the previous dialog. But this is for text. I'm compiling for text. And then I need to go through each one of these subsections and set it up. We will do that, but this is just an example of how it works, and I'm not going to change anything. But how do I get the right information in the email? So, for instance, if there was something in the compile, would I see it in the synopsis? No, because each element of my scrivening, the title of it, the metadata of it, the synopsis of it, the notes of it, and finally the content, i.e. the text of it, is available there. And I'm not including the metadata, the synopsis, or the notes. That's not going through. All I want to see is anywhere that I have the chapter number and the text heading. I mean, to be honest, I'm never going to have that in here. But what I'm interested in is titles of new pages. So if it's multiple scrivenings, I want the titles. And other than that, I want the text. And then underneath that, I tell it what I want it to look like. So my text section, that's the most important. That is just the text from a single scrivening. What do you want it to look like? Now in the formatting, there's formatting and there's title options and new pages and prefix and suffix. There's all of that. But remember, it's going to text. So in here, these are dimmed out. I can't change the font because it's plain text. I can override it, but it won't do any good because it's plain text. But maybe with the title, I do want to insert something in there. So the option's available to me, but it's telling me the format not relevant at this moment. Then you've got all of these other options. Now, the things that are relevant to making this email is this that's highlighted, include the text. As we work through the others, nothing really relevant in here. Obviously, that this is where it gets interesting, which is the styles. It's going out as plain text. So, crying out loud, how come you can have that? I've got button amber, button green. Interesting. But this actually, these are styles. These are styles that we will see applied to the content. So let's quickly have a look at this. This is a button. And I can tell it's a green button because it's got a green background. It has a style called button green. And that is what is being referred to in the compile. So when we go in and we look at button green, so let's get back in and edit the format for the MacBites mail. Button green has some text on it here. That is what it actually looks like. That's what it looks like in Scrivener. That's not what it looks like when it's compiled. So how do I format that? How do I say, do you know what? If something has a button green style in Scrivener, when it's output, can you make that a HTML button? And how I do that is by adding over here markup to it. So anything that is formatted as button green, when you export it, put this text in front of it, which is some HTML attached to a style sheet to make it green. And at the end of it, wrap it in that. So this one opens a class, a CSS. Don't worry about the technicalities of it, but it opens a CSS class and this one closes it. And it does exactly the same with the green inline and the red, and each one has a different class. It's really annoying that you can't zoom in here, but that says button red. And if we look at the green one, it says button green. So each one of these has to be manually told what to do. This is the long process at the beginning. When I said to you, I spent 3 days sorting out a compile. Yeah, but I've used it every day for the last 5 years. So it was worth the 3 days. This is why. Because each one of these, I'm writing exactly what I want it to do. If something looks like a code block, wrap it in code tags. If it's a heading 1, guess what? Wrap it in heading 1 tags. Heading 2 tags, and heading 3. Paragraphs are wrapped in p tags. If it's a raw code block, I'm not doing anything with it. I'm treating it as raw markup. So it will just add itself. There's an unordered list, and this one gets more complicated. I want you to wrap it in unordered list tags. But within it, each paragraph, I want you to wrap in an LI, which makes a list. So what this bit of the compile is doing is saying, take these Scrivener styles, which was why we took some time to look at Scrivener styles, and that's what I want it to look like in Scrivener. But when it comes to outputting it, this little bit in here, so this whole styles section in here, which is broken up into the styles bit here and the instructions here, do a kind of translation. It says, what looks like that, make it look like this. What looks like that, make it look like this. That's the bit that takes the time, but it's worth doing. Then you get on to the text layout bit. Now, this looks even worse, doesn't it? But let me explain. This is defined in Scrivener. So if I've got a button and it's green, it's got green text on it. And that's what it looks like in Scrivener. When I output it, I want it to have a class on it of button green. But what does button green look like? This is just an instruction. It doesn't explain what that looks like. That's where the text layout bit comes in. In here, we will have button green somewhere. Button green is in here, probably under buttons. Let's have a look. That's highlights. And this is CSS. Here we go. Button red in line. Button red, and here's button green. Whoa, there it is. There's button green. So that is raw CSS. If you've never written CSS before, I appreciate it looks hideous. But I wrote that in a text editor, CSS editor, and brought it in here. Didn't write it by hand. And what it's doing at the very top is saying, right, this is a document, and what follows is CSS. This is the version number of this CSS. So it goes back to 2018. And then there's the instructions for what the email should look like. The details of this don't matter. If you want more details of it, let me know. But the details don't matter. All I'm doing is saying, take the content of the compile and put all of that before it and all of this after it. So just like in here, we have a before and an after, and a paragraph before and a paragraph after. This section just gives us a document before and a document after, which enables me to put a sign off in it and then close a lot of the open things that I've got. And here's how to contact us. And then it goes into 2 columns, and then there's some pickies in there. And all of these tabs here that is perfectly written CSS. But it was something that I did once, and I don't have to go in there and change it unless we move or something like that, which we did, didn't we, a year ago? We moved our virtual address, so I did have to go in here and sort that out. But this is where the magic happens. There, for example, is the signature. So newsletter assets, signature, MacBites. What does that look like? Let's get a page here, and let's just put the URL in. And that brings that graphic in. It's a live URL, and it brings that graphic in. Right, that's as complicated as it gets, because compiling to an email was not really what Scrivener was intended for. So it's a matter of mind over matter making it do that. But these are just the things that you can do in compile. You've then got whether you update these, and many of these things you won't use. And notice I'm not changing any of them. I'm just explaining what they're for. This is how I mark up an external link. So again, put that before it, that after it, that before it, that after it. Simple as that. And if I put the images in there, I actually drag and drop an image into it, which you've seen I've done. Let's check that. I didn't say, oh, that's on S3. It's in this location. I didn't. For any of them. There's 3 graphics in there, and I just dragged and dropped the graphic in. And I actually have in here, to make my life a whole lot easier, I have assets. So here's my content library, and there's my posters. Poster archive and posters. They live in here. They are all in here. So when I drag and drop them from in there into my document, so my announcement here, not that one, that one, how on earth does it know where they are? Because I've not told it where they are on the web. Right, this is how it knows. It knows because of the compile. So when I'm in here, in my markup, it says replace images with text. Now you might think, why are you replacing images with text? I'm replacing images with text because I'm creating a HTML file. So when it finds an image, it deletes it and it replaces it with this, which is a root URL on S3. Newsletter assets. And then it takes the file name and it puts that instead of that placeholder. We will look in more detail at placeholders, but that's one of the placeholders and it just replaces it. Right, if we go to Finder, let's have Finder, and I will show you there. I have MacBites S3, newsletter assets. There are all the posters. There was the show art for 150. So that was one. The other one was 150 of these, wasn't it? So somewhere that's in there. Let's do a search. There we go. That's the second one it found. So they live on the web. They live on S3. But that is how a physical graphic gets changed to code. It's done in the markup section. Then you've got all of these other options. So this is transforming things and making replacements and statistics and what to do with footnotes and endnotes and comments, which we will look at. And that's if you want to post-process it. I've not made any changes. Once that's built, it's built. That's it. What I then do is just hit compile. And it gives me this. And it's offering me this folder, comms folder, because that's where we put all the comms. It's appending a HTML extension because it is HTML. And then you can open it in something. Now, I could open that in BBEdit. I could actually open it in Vivaldi, right down the bottom. But I've actually got that opening in Browser Ninja, which is somewhere near the top. And it will open in whatever is the default browser. Right, I will then export that. It opens it up. I will bring that on. And that is what I get out with a compile. So all of this bit at the top that we see, the graphic, the MacBites, that's coming from the bit before. We had a before and an after for the entire file. Lots and lots of code. Remember? That's that bit. This is coming from inside Scrivener. The graphic is coming from inside Scrivener. All of this is inside Scrivener. So everything from that word there, new MacBites, all the way down to there, that bit is coming from Scrivener. This bit at the bottom, well, you saw the graphic, all of that bit there is coming from the code in the after section. So that's what puts in those. These are all live links as well. That is how the compile actually works. But that's for something weird like an email. So this is actually the green button. That's what makes it look like a green button. Every compile works the same way. It's just that they do very, very, very different things in terms of how they look. Carol says, do all images need to be on the web? Yes, they do. Depending on what you're doing with it. So I'm making an email that's HTML. It can't have graphics inside it. But it can, with an instruction, show a graphic on the web. So if your output is HTML, then yes, the graphics need to be online. But if it's an EPUB, no, then they can be inside it. Because an EPUB is in essence a website wrapped up in a folder in a zip file. If you open that and you open the index file, It would be, you would find a HTML file, you would open it up, and you could read it in a browser, which is why they have wrappers around it, because obviously if everybody could open an EPUB, you may have problems selling it because it would just be ripped off in 5 seconds. So there are things that you can do, but yeah, the graphics can go in there, so it's portable. Because if it wasn't portable, then if you imagine you're reading that on an e-reader that doesn't have web connectivity, than for like, on a network, you're on a train somewhere, you've got no network, you wouldn't be seeing the graphics. So depending on the output, the graphics will ship with it or not. With my output here, which is HTML, the graphics don't ship with it. Having said that the graphics don't ship with it, I would love to be able to show you this working, but this is Apple. Yeah, they're annoying me. Right, comms folder. And there's my graphic. That is the actual output of this. So when I open it up, I get a HTML file and I get these graphics that are stored locally. But these graphics are also stored remotely. They're on S3 as well. So the fact that it exports them, technically speaking, I should be able to delete those and it would still work. What I've been doing for the last 5 years is previewing it with Quick Look. And the graphics are no longer working. This is a big ol' thing. Apple are now not supporting remote graphics. If they were reading the local graphics, then you'd see them because you can see the graphics. They're there. And it will preview these, but individually. So the only way I can do that is to actually open that file. So if I delete these and I open that file, you will still see the graphics because it's pulling them in from the web. If I right click on one of these and say, where's open the image in a new window. Open the image in a new tab, that'll do nicely. It loads in that from there. So if your output is HTML that doesn't support graphics inherently, then yes, they need to be on the web. If they're not, if it's printed, if it's PDF, if it's EPUB, you'll be fine. And now I've lost the chat, so I need to get rid of that. So hopefully that answers that question. Right, so that was that. That's the basics, but we need to go back to this file. And in here, when you go to compile, what you will see and what will be available to you will depend on the template that you use to create it. So you see, I don't have these file formats thrown at me, but I do have others. But what these will give you is what Scrivener thinks are important file types for you to compile to. So you've got this outline. So this will create an outline. And it's saying no layouts from this format have been assigned. That's something that we're going to look at because we have formats on the left, we have layouts in the middle, and we have instructions on the right. This was the big change in version 3. This was the thing people didn't like. But this is giving you an amazing level of flexibility. But you do have to set this up initially the first time manually. You've then got a fully indented outline. So these are just different kinds of things, formats that you would need probably for a novel. Probably for a novel, even though this was a blank one. These are different formats in terms of you've got paperbacks, different sizes of paperbacks, you've got proof copies, and if you're creating a script or a screenplay, you can send it out looking totally different. The thing is to remember with these formats, the content is the same. You're just sending it out in different ways. Now, I think that what Brilliant Sigma was talking about when he said I did compile a course. Yeah, I created, that was when I spent 3 days doing the compile, but I have used it ever since. I'm taking the same content and compiling it completely differently. And I don't just mean a small paperback and a bigger paperback. I mean completely differently. I'm taking different content and doing it. So that's what we'll work up to. So we'll probably do the course thing on the last week. But what you have available here depends on how you started. And it's more even nuanced than that. If we look at what we've got here, we created an inbox, we have the shows, we've got this admin section that we built. That's the draft. That's where the content is supposed to be. So all of the content was going to be in the draft folder. We had research and we had trash, and that was it. Now, why does that matter at this point? Well, if we look at MacBites, for example, we have in here, that's next week's show, and that was last week's, so that's fine. Right, in here I have this folder called Front Matter. And the front matter is the front cover of our recording notes. But we don't have a front matter folder or a back matter folder or any other kind of folder in our blank template. It didn't include it. So this one was based on blank, but if we go to File and New Project, this is where it's great to get it right from the start. We need to choose a template that is going to help us down the line. So if you're writing fiction, the fiction one is a good place to start. If it's a short story, then the short story one will work. And then your only other two options are a novel with parts and a novel without parts. That's it. But what these will have, that this one did not have, is extra folders that will come into play when you come to compile. So let's say we were working on this novel without parts. And I am not putting that in iCloud. No good will come of putting it in iCloud. Right, novel. Let's put it in there. And we'll do a comparison with what you've got now. And you've got a heck of a lot more in the binder. And it's at the point of compile that you'll be thinking, where's the front matter folder? Right, there is the front matter folder. This is shipping with it because this is brand new. I've not done anything else with that. And it's separated into individual folders. That's because initially you will have the manuscript and you will want a title page that fits the manuscript format. So when you go into there, look at that. It's picked up my name and it's picked up my email address. And it's picking that up from the settings within it. The other options you have in here, like this, these are placeholders. So if we configure the placeholders, and the instructions for that are over here, then this will automatically, at the point of compile, complete itself. But that's nuanced and it's down the line. What we're focusing on today is that choosing the right template gives you access to elements that you will use at the point of compile. So the front matter folder for the manuscript. We then have front matter for the paperback. And there's more in here. We have the title page. We have a copyright. We have the dedication and a blank page. You might be wondering why there's a blank page. Blank pages, and again it's a code, are used to make sure that the title page, the copyright and the dedication are all in the right places. Do they start on a recto page or a verso page? The right hand page or the left hand page? And if you want to force something to be in a certain place, use the blank page option, and then you don't have to put in a million carriage returns. That will then, depending on the size of a carriage return, potentially knock everything out. So that's what this code, this blank page code, is for. As it says over here, Scrivener is going to try and remove unnecessary pages, but the blank page tag tells it to leave that page alone, even though it's blank. That is for your paperback. But if you're making an ebook, then you're going to need something different again. So we've got different from the manuscript and different from the paperback. In here we have a cover. And they've actually provided you with a cover because this cover in here is perfectly sized. That's the right size for it. So obviously you would replace that with your own. And then there is an option for the dedication, and again you put your dedication in there. Right, this is something that you do and you fill it all in. When it comes to the point of compile, it will compile your work, which will be in your manuscript, and merge it with front matter and back matter if there's back matter in here as well. This template gives you an example of what that will look like. So up here, we've got exactly the same format. Mine said Elaine Giles and it had my email address on it. It had a code for the number of words, and it had codes down here for the title and the author. So that's the first page of it. And then in here, it will use the surname, title, and a page number. And it's in a format that is an accepted standard format for a publishing company or your agent or whoever to go through and check that. That is the accepted format. Now, this is why compile is so important, because who wants to write it looking like that? Plus the fact, once it passes its manuscript phase, you wouldn't publish a book like that either. It wouldn't look like that. So rather than have the whole thing have to be typeset or retypeset, the idea is that Scrivener steps in and can produce all the formats that you want, which will save a fortune in having the thing reset. So that's what it looks like in that as a standard manuscript for checking. Okay. The same content, obviously this is coming from up here somewhere. In fact, it doesn't look like it is in that point. It looks like this is just a sample. But the same content can look like this with different margins, different font, different spacing, but it's the same content. That's what you can do with it. And that's what I do with it. So when I'm making a course, I think I actually have a course. That one's probably got everything in it. So let's come out of the course content. This is everything in there. So this is all meta information, but this is the actual course content in there. Don't you love notes to be added somewhere? Don't tell myself where. But what I've got in here, this is slightly different because you wouldn't really be producing a book directly from this, but I need to work with it looking like that. Right, when we get down in here, there's more script in it. But if I wanted to produce that, so I wanted to compile that out to something, and I don't particularly want it to be that font and look like that, I've got all of these options in here. So if I wanted it to be a paperback, well, I would want this to be a paperback, but I can do. And all I need to do is allocate the layout, and this is what the font will look like, but it doesn't look anything like that in Scrivener. That's the beauty of it. Work with it in Scrivener in 56-point purple font, if you like, on a yellow background. But when you come to compile, it's a bit like getting something ready for print. What does that need to look like for whatever it is you're creating? A manuscript, a paperback, an EPUB. What do you want it to look like at that point? That's the thing. I think if you can grasp that from Scrivener, you're doing well, because that's where most people fall over with it. It's like, but I want to write it in 9-point Times New Roman because that's how I want it printed. Yes, I know, but it's got to go through a manuscript stage before that, which is going to be in Source Code Pro in 14. Do you want to write in that? It doesn't matter. You change it, it morphs. It's like a chameleon at the point that you compile it. So, where's our other file? It was our novel file, wasn't it? There. So it just gives you the ultimate in flexibility. It doesn't matter what it looks like when you're working with it. But starting with the right, in inverted commas, the right template gives you, in this case, a sample of output. It gives you the front matter. It could give you the back matter. There's nothing special about this front matter at all. So let me show you. If you've already done it and you're thinking, oh no, I've already done it and now I've not got any front matter. It's really simple. In our demo, we have no front matter, but there's a couple of things we could do about that. One is the easy way, which is we create a brand new file based on the right template, and we drag the front matter into there. And now, guess what? We've got front matter. These are just standard Scrivener content. There's nothing special in here at all. So that's one option. Second option, and we'd probably put that above here. is just create it. So in this case, let's say I need, I'll insert a new folder. I will call this back matter. And this is where I'm going to put the stuff for the back. And again, I look in here and I think, okay, not really going to need it at the manuscript stage, but would need it at the paperback stage. So let's go put that in there, paperback, and let's go put another one in, which is the ebook. Put these in the right place. So that needs to be indented, that needs to be indented. And then just put scrivenings in there. So blurb for the back and put it in there. So it's not fatal if you've used a different template. You've got lots of options when it comes to fixing that. You can either create it from, I mean, if somebody else says, I've got the perfect set of front and back matter, and they send you a file and that's what's in it, just drag and drop them out and put them in yours. And the things that are in here, like a title page, you won't get their title, you'll get yours, because that is a placeholder and it only gets updated at the point that it is compiled. So we might be able to see that if it'll do it to a PDF. Let's have a look. In fact, it's not liking exporting at all at the moment. Come on, we can do a compile. You can do it. Good grief, what's in here? It's getting upset. It's not showing the compile. Why are you not doing that? Let's get back to the draft and try it again. Or have I just broken it? No, it's getting there. It's getting there. Let's try a paperback. And here's off. Well, that's in it, but no, I'm going to have to do it a bit more detailed than that. But it's not difficult. Once you've got these folders in here, it's not difficult, and it's not fatal if you didn't have them in there from the start. But if you go back to new project, every one of these is different. So obviously you've got your novel and your novel with parts, but what if you're writing non-fiction? Then you've got like, well, an essay style. It's not really an essay. No, that's not what I'm creating. What would I be creating? I'd be creating a manual. Does any of those work? No, not really. General non-fiction might. It might. That one might. Script writing is grand as long as it's the right format. So if it's a radio scene thing or it's a tape drama, this is the kind of thing you'd probably see with Siri. But other than that, no, there's nothing that's a particular manual. The nearest I've got is general non-fiction. But the issue with that is it's got a different format on it. So maybe general non-fiction. Oh, let's try that one. Non-fiction. And just have a look what it's got in the way of front and back matter. And this one does have back matter. So we have front matter, we've got the same three we had before, but now we've got back matter as well. So manuscript formatting, it's the endnotes. And again, it's going to be generated at the point that you compile it. And for the paperback, you have notes. So what I've got there might be great if I wanted to produce this with front and back matter, but I'm looking at it and thinking, for what I do, there's a lot of stuff missing. So we will have an extra session on creating your own template as well. But everything that you work through, it doesn't matter what these templates are, open them up, create one, go and have a look at them. Because you may find things in here that are really useful for your stuff. And there's always a sample of what that would look like. So in this case, we've got the contents in it, and this is what the actual content looks like. I would not be compiling to that because I wouldn't want the font to look like that, and mine would have a lot of graphics in it. But all of that we can handle down the line. So how are we feeling about compile? Carol wants to know, can she place images in ebook? Yes, you can. Yes, you absolutely can. They can be a little bit finicky because the ebook format's quite old. I think if they were designing it today, it would be more flexible. There are limits on the size of it, and there's limits on what that would look like. So, for instance, you have to think with an ebook, yes, you can put images in it. What would they be images of? Well, if it's you, I'm suspecting stitching guidelines, which would be fine. They'd be square images, and it wouldn't matter how somebody decided to read that. And what I mean by that is you have to think about people who are maybe reading it on an iPad and it would look perfect. What does it look like in black and white? Because if they're reading it on a Kindle, that image is going to look quite different. So when you're working with your images, think about the fact of how people consume it. On a desktop, it's going to be in colour. On an iPad, it's going to be in colour. But on a Kindle, what does that image look like on a Kindle? And this is why you get such quality issues with many books that you get. For EPUBs in particular, it's just a bit of an issue. They can all be dealt with, but don't use things like separators. Some people, you see chapter 1 and there's a big flourish of a separator underneath it. And it's a black wavy line on a white background. Have you ever seen what that looks like when you're using a cream background? Or what it looks like in night mode? Horrific. So you just have to think you have the least control on consumption with an ebook. You have the most control over consumption with a PDF. So if something has to look a certain way, and it has to be an EPUB, you can do it by creating an EPUB that only works on certain devices. So if you've ever gone to the free book section, you may have found a free book, and then when you come to buy it, to download it, it lists like the Kindle app, but none of your devices. And that's because the author has decided that that book is so specialised in terms of layout that it needs to live only on certain devices. So I've seen that particularly with books for children that are very graphics heavy. But if what you're doing is putting like an example of a stitch within it, I think you'd be absolutely fine. The only thing I would say is check what it looks like on a Kindle. Check it in black and white. Sometimes you might need to change the image and even choose to use a black and white image on a colour device just for the clarity of it. But yes, you can definitely put them in there. No problems with that at all. So that was week 1. How are we feeling? I know there's a lot to take in, but it is where the power in Scrivener is. So by the end of all of the compiles, we'll have compiled an EPUB, which we can share, which will work. We will have compiled PDFs. We will have compiled emails. And I will show you what I do with the course thing. But if you've got any more information about that, let me know. Right, let's get back into here and see what else we've got coming up this week. Oh, first up, we've got the unboxing. Do you think I need another light on? It's mighty dark in here, but that could just be me.
Just stick the light on.
Well, if you put that one on, it might work or it might not. It might get very, what's the word I'm looking for?
Hot.
No. Well, yes, it'll get hot because they're
shadowy.
It might get shadowy. Let's have a look. Let's set the desk up ready for the unboxing. Let's set that up over there. And let's see what we've got camera-wise. I'm not sure that that's in focus, but that could just be me. Obviously, remember last week we had such issues. So I'm going to pass you over to that and we'll go get it. In the meanwhile, I am going to need this to get rid of that because it's acting up again. And I need to do some magic beans so things are working. Oh, joy. That looks like it's working, but I don't believe it. I don't believe it for 1 second. Right, let's put the keyboard away and let's get the box. That is mighty heavy, isn't it?
Yes.
This is probably the heaviest thing we've ever unboxed. I would drop that, but it's mighty big and it's heavy. So let's pull this back and see if how in focus is that? Or that's an iPad that's in the way. So let's move that. Is it refocusing?
Looks in focus.
Right, well, let's not move it then. Let's leave it where it is and get the scissors out, ready for the unboxing. Oh, fingers crossed on this one. This is really important. This is not something that we can have a calamity with, is it, Mike?
No.
So let's get that unboxed.
Renee says, wallet ready, steady, go.
No, it's okay. You'll be fine.
The wallet can stand down this week.
Stand down until Monday, but keep it warm for Monday. Right, let's get in there. Ooh, I'm in. I'm going to need to move it so you can see it. Let's move it that way. Ah, there we go. Let's open it up. Ew! Should we take one out?
Take one out.
Let's take one out, because there's more than one. There's packets of it. There's oodles of them. Right, there we go. That's the side bit. Oh! Right. If it's heavy, it usually costs much. Well, it wasn't a cheap job, let's put it like that. Let's get the box out of the way. There we go. Okay. And let's bring it on. Oh, the printers surpassed themselves. They've arrived. Do you want to see them? I want to see them. I definitely want to see them. They're here. I think there's about 500 of them in a box. You see, they're heavy. They're definitely heavy. Right, scissors again. In we go with the scissors. I think these scissors have seen better days, you know. At which point Mike usually offers me the other ones, but they're pink and they freak me out. I'll need to get the blue ones out, don't I? Oh, this is not good. Be better off with the nail scissors. Let's get in and have a look. Oh, this is my favourite bit. I'm always nervy until it's in my hand. So let's go in this end. And we are in, I do believe. But the way that they wrap them, you've got to take the plastic totally off because of the band around the middle. Right, got the plastic off. There's the band round the middle. Plastic, Mike. Ooh! One for me. Right, let's get that there. Looking good. Looking good so far. Look, there's the new style that I made and the text that I added. Awesome. There's the inside. Can we see the whole thing? I think we can. Let's tip it back a bit. There we go. So graphic on the right hand side. That was a good call with that graphic. No page numbers because he didn't need it. You know, only been internally 6 pages. Right, let's get to the food bit. There we go. I can tip that up a bit, I think, and you can see it. Again, looking good. Liking it so far. And how did the pickies turn out at the back? Oh, I'm happy with those. Considering what I started with, that looks amazing. You know, you say to people, can I have the best image you've got? And you get a 640 grainy image that was taken from a video. Okay, I'll do what I can with it. There we go. And on the back, it's shiny on the front and shiny on the back. And there we go. Well, at least they're the right way round, Mike. We did have a lot printed. And the pages weren't in the right order. That would have been a good time to put page numbers on it, but these are actually... It's hard to go wrong with something like that, I would have thought. But you never know, do you? I guess it could go wrong. But it's always good when they arrive, and I'm like, oh, I'm happy with that. So, nice quality pages, thicker than usual, because it's a programme, because there's only that number of pages. Job done. Just got to get it to them next week and hope that nobody's got COVID. This is usually the moment you see a typo. Well, Renee, you're funny you should say that. I checked it. Mike checked it. And how many others were there? 3?
3 others checked.
And another 3 checked it. We got a couple of things they wanted changing, so I sorted those out and then sent it back to be checked again. So it's been checked about 16, 17 times. Now, of course, would not be the time to find that there is a typo. But I have every confidence there's no typos in it. Fingers crossed. Thank you. I'm glad you like the look of it. I like the look of it as well. Awesome stuff. Yeah, that arrived and in 2 lots, didn't it? So Mike sat there waiting for a time delivery from DPD and got 2. One was really early, wasn't it?
One was at 7:30. The other was about 2:00.
No, you see, 7:30 wouldn't suit me, would it? No, 7:30's not going to work for me, I can assure you. Right, okay. I'm glad they're here and I'm glad they're okay. A week to go. This time next week, they'll all be bopping away. Right, where did that go? Where did my other bit go? Oh, that's not good, is it? Let's go back and try again. Right, okay. So, we need to switch to that. And what have we got coming up? Oh, well, we are back this time next week with part 2 of Compile. But you don't have to wait that long. Not only do you not have to wait that long because there'll be a MacBites at some point, but Monday is where it's at. 5 o'clock UK time, which is noon Eastern and 9 a.m. Pacific and 6 p.m. Central European time. We will be going live with a MacBites Live. We will then go into the great, we are hoping, Apple event. I heard Timmy say this week, we have big things coming. And my heart skipped a beat as I thought, 32-inch iMac. 32-inch iMac, Timothy. So fingers crossed for something. Although, don't get your hopes up. It could be a 17-inch MacBook Pro, couldn't it? Or it could be a 17-inch iPad. I wouldn't put that past him either. You know, just to tease me. Because on the one hand, it's like, yeah, I expect there to be an iMac. And then on the other, it's like, no, there's not going to be an iMac. Because it doesn't feel like it at the moment. So fingers crossed anyway. We'll have fun no matter what, won't we? Shall we take a vote? Do you want bingo cards? Let me know if you want bingo cards. I think there might be a Mac Mini, and if there's a Mac Mini, I am potentially in the market for a Mac Mini. But I'm going to enjoy myself anyway, because even if I'm not going to buy anything, I'm going to vicariously enjoy Renee buying stuff. I usually rely on Graham, but at the moment, I think Renee's possibly going to jump before Graham. Oh, I'm loving it. Yes, look at the RSS feed. That's our logo for live. And it was based on the RSS logo. It was. I had trouble finding somewhere to put it this time with that blurry thing. Apparently that there's an Easter egg on the site that you can see, but it doesn't tell you what they're going to tell you. And have you noticed it's a Monday when usually it's a Tuesday? We ruled out this Tuesday because Google are going on the 19th. So maybe that's why they moved it to a Monday. Anyway, we're also available on demand. You will find everything at youtube.com/Elaine Giles, where there is a playlist. And the shows get added to the playlist straight away. The chapter markers get added on a Saturday afternoon. It would be Saturday morning, but Google doesn't behave well on a Saturday morning, does it? No. So we've done it on a Saturday morning before and then had to redo them. So no. So yes, it's available at macbites.co.uk/after hours playlist. And then, of course, there'll be a new MacBites. Should I make a promise of 8 o'clock on Tuesday, or should we say it could be Wednesday at this rate? Because we've got the event on Monday. I do wish they wouldn't mess with our schedule. If we could just sort that out, Timothy. We take priority, remember? Because if we get out of sync, well, it could all just fall down. And, Jonathan would be really upset, wouldn't he? Because he's got into the habit now. So, yeah, you could stop playing with our minds and our schedule. But whenever it is, it'll be on MacBites FM and we'll send you a mail. We love you guys. If you love us, could you give us a like? Because it really makes a difference with YouTube. It's how they spread the love in their algorithm. Right, if you want details of all that I'm doing and the Scrivener stuff, I'm sending out extra mails about the Scrivener stuff, but that only goes to my list, which is elainegiles.com/VIP. Then there's the MacBites mail, which is all things MacBites, and that is at macbites.co.uk/MacBites-mail. And there's Slack. We have an active Slack chat room where we carry on the conversation. Oh, it's such fun. And that is macbites.co.uk/Slack, where you have some link, don't you? An invitation link?
There is an invitation.
Oh, try the invitation link. Well, I say stick it in the chat, but, it never likes you, does it? But if you want to get there, you know where we are. And you can get us at all those places as well. What more could you possibly need than all of that lot? Right, let's do that. Which frees me up so I can see the chat. Yay! Right, where's the chat? Let me bring the chat on. Okay, I've got 2 questions for a start. Right, question for later. What other podcasts do Elena might listen to, and how many is too many? I must admit, podcasts. I don't listen to any tech podcasts. The podcasts I've listened to, I loved. They tend to be like a serial-based thing. So I loved the Death in Ice Valley, which was a BBC podcast. That was amazing. What was the other one that I listened to? West Cork. Loved West Cork. They're kind of series-based true crime. Those are the ones that I enjoy. I started listening to one this week on Audible, an Audible exclusive, and no, it's not for me. It's like, God, how stupid are these women? So no, that one didn't work. What about you?
Me? I listened to the official Manchester United podcast.
I didn't even know they had one.
Yes, you did. Eric was on it.
Only when Eric was on it. When you said, I said, well, what podcast is it? And you said, the United podcast. And I said, who makes that? And he went, United.
Yeah. The old man was on it last week.
Oh, well, I didn't know, did I?
Power Query Magic, Raw Data, and Explicit Measures.
Steady on. Tell me. No, it's not. It's not a podcast of an adult nature.
No.
It's a podcast of an Excel nature.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I don't actually listen to too many podcasts. Probably what I do instead of podcasts is I watch a lot of YouTube videos. Again, I like true crime, but with YouTube, I'll be researching stuff and I'll just watch random videos, depending on what the topic is. Okay, and another question. When you play the Siri man versus the lady at the end of the podcast, that's the Siri sketch, isn't that copyrighted to Apple or is it allowed?
Well, we were there first, actually.
It's so funny that we were there first. So many moons ago, yesterday, 10 years ago, we got Siri. And it was like, well, what can you ask him to do? And what about this? So I started from that day, talking to him and trying to get him to answer in a way that I could record and it would make it funny. And back in the day, it was a nightmare. It was tricky. But I got a workflow that worked and we started, Siri started saying something at the end of each show. At the time, without Lady Siri, because we didn't have Lady Siri. That was October. I think it took Apple 2 years. But they opened a WWDC with Siri talking and making jokes. And Mike and I just looked at each other and I said, somebody at Cupertino listens to MacBites then. It was a total rip-off, but we were there first. So no, it's not copyrighted to Apple because that's just the ability of Siri to speak. But what Siri actually says is wholly different. So no, that will be copyright to us. We can't stop them, obviously, getting their Siri to speak or anybody else's Siri to speak. But the thing is, once you start writing a sketch for Siri, your Siri becomes like... There's a big difference between Siri and Lady Siri. And when you're writing the script, you're aware of that. So it's like being a script writer. But yeah, we had it first, and then Apple put it in the WWDC keynote. Oh, Renee has never used the guy's Siri. Well, that's the default in the UK. I know in America it's Lady Siri, isn't it? It's always been, that is the default in the UK. And I've never changed it. I mean, I could change it. But you get used to Siri. He is he's been our co-host for 10 years. So whenever there's like, they're changing Siri's voice, it's like, no, they're not. No, they're not. Because that's Siri. But we love him. We do love him to pieces, don't we? I've used Lady Siri, obviously. And didn't we use Aussie Siri once?
I think we did.
I think we had Aussie Lady Siri in one episode as well. And of course, there's the A Lady as well. Of which Mike has a funny story to share with you, don't you?
Yeah, yesterday I was in a meeting and I was looking before the meeting at the names of the attendees. And one of them was called Alexa. She wasn't called the A Lady, so I couldn't say that, but you know what I mean.
Despite the fact he whispered that, she's just said, I'm sorry, I don't know that one.
Ears like a bat.
She has ears like a bat.
Anyway, I was looking through the list of attendees for this meeting. I thought I'd better put the A Lady on the landing on mute, because as soon as I say hello, Alexa, in the meeting, that one out there will start.
And she did. Oh, I do love that. Oh, Kim said she never heard Siri until MacBites. Only Lady Siri. You didn't know you could change it. Oh, well, you can, but it went weird, didn't it? You used to be able to choose like male or female and an age and a location. And if you remember, there was an update and we did a skit on it, didn't we? They just changed it to voice 1, 2 and 3. So you now actually have to listen. They don't even tell you if it's male or female because that's not fair to trans. And I'm like, but which one was the original? I just want the original one. Just leave it alone. But no, you actually have to listen to each one. So I find that stupid. Why not give them like a generic name? It doesn't have to be a pre-gendered name. There's enough gender neutral names to give them gender neutral names and leave it at that. They'll just let you listen. But no, they don't do that. They just make it annoying. Renee could hear her. She has the ears of a bat on the landing, except... So we're in the studio, the door's open, but you're looking at a good 12 to 15 foot away. But she's got the ears of a bat, except when Mike is outside trying not to disturb me. So he leans down and whispers right into her little speaker, "Hey lady, turn the toilet light on." And she totally ignores him. Until in the end, you're getting a whispered, "Turn the toilet light on," going, "Turn the toilet light on." I'm like, Mike, that's not whispering. I can hear you.
The other day, because I've just logged into my work email to check the work directory, because I knew I meant to tell you this. The other day, I had somebody on my course from China whose first name was Echo. So we had Echo and Alexa.
We do have one, don't we? Because we have matching A-ladies in the bedroom, one on either side of the bed. So one replies to A-lady and the other replies to E-lady. And it's like, if one ignores you, just try the other. But I'd never thought of somebody being called E-lady
Echo
on a course. I do know there's a Microsoft employee called Siri. He's a scream.
Is there? Oh, there is.
Yeah, he was in one of their events.
Yeah,
and they have to like say HEY Siri rather than ask him a question with the word hey in front of it.
Somebody used to work for AZ called Virgin Mary.
Oh, I remember that. No, wasn't it Mary Virgin?
Oh, I thought it was Virgin Mary.
I think you'll find it was Mary Virgin, but the way that the email works, they put the surname first, and then she became Virgin Mary. She's a classic. Oh, the things people have to put up with. Do you know, I'm not at all sure about the how sharp that webcam is. I've got problems with the webcam. It's just misbehaving itself grossly, all of them. But I've got that one perched at the top and I've got another one perched. So I need to sort it out. If there were 15 days in a week, I might be able to do that. But the odds are that there probably isn't again. And I just need more time. I need more time. Oh.
Well, she doesn't work there now. The Virgin Mary.
Oh, is she gone? Oh, dear. Yeah. Carol's just written an article featuring Joe and Sam and they could be either gender. Exactly. There's so many names now that could be. And there's one thing, and I have never, ever, this won't come as a surprise to you, never, ever visited Mumsnet. It's a terrifying place. But sometimes I'll see like a story that has come from somewhere else and they're quoting Mumsnet. And one of them, usually they're about names. And I'm like, well, what difference does it make what you call a child? It's up to you. I mean, there are some names that you would think that's a bit dicey. I'm trying to think, what kind of names would you think were really dicey? I mean, if you were calling a child the A-lady name today, you'd have to want locking up, wouldn't you? No matter whether it's a family name or you love it, you would seriously have to think about that poor child. But the venom that comes back from people with "you can't call your child that." One of them was a girl. She was from some Eastern Bloc style country, maybe out Bulgaria, Hungarian way. And she had always had this name in mind for a child. And she mentioned calling her child this and she got nothing but abuse. And I'm like, well, it's not what I'd call a child, but there's nothing wrong with it. It's a really popular name where she comes from. It's an important name to her and her family. And the reason she asked the question, because, one option, don't ask the question. don't want to know the answer, don't ask the question. But one, well, she asked the question, but I wouldn't have done. But she asked the question because she'd heard that this name in the States was an insult. And it reminded me, when we were kids, probably about 8, 9, 10, there was a show on in the UK, wasn't there, called Crossroads. Mm. And there was a guy in it who was a bit simple, called Benny. And while there's nothing wrong with the name Benny, it became associated, you're a bit of a Benny, meaning you're a bit slow. Well, apparently that's what this name means in the States. And I'd never heard it. Nimrod. Yeah, she wanted to call the kid Nimrod. Oh. Which is quite unusual. It's certainly unusual in the UK.
Aircraft, isn't it?
Yeah, that was my first thought. Aircraft. Mm. I mean, it'd be a bit off if you wanted to call a kid Hindenburg, seeing as though it crashed and burnt. But Nimrod, to me, I didn't have any negative connotations with it. It's just not particularly a British name. It turns out, in America, it's an insult. Oh. Well, I didn't know.
Me neither.
So you could be using a name that's an insult that you're not even aware of. But apparently so. Apparently it means a bit of a dipstick, a bit of an idiot, would you say? Mm. I had no idea. So they told her to call this kid something else. And I think it was something like, what was the alternative name?
Concord.
I think something like Stanislaw or something. And I thought, well, Nimrod's better than that. But people are nasty. Oh. We have an EPO or EPO. No, we don't have that one. And Carol Sonny's Benjamin never shortened it to Benny. I think Benny kind of petered out as meaning slow or simple. I think it was an of the time thing. And Benjamin's a lovely name. Ben works, Benji. It's a lovely name. So I think luckily the name was in use to such a degree that the being slow part kind of died out when the show did, thankfully. But it doesn't really matter what you call a child, because if my mum was alive today, she'd be turning in a grave if you could understand the difference with that, because of a Karen. If you're a Karen, but she called me Elaine Karen, and it was in her mind, is it Elaine Karen or Karen Elaine? And she went with Elaine Karen. But I've got a friend. They were friends with my mum, and her kid she called Karen Elaine. And now Karen means like an angry woman, a bit like a bacon, isn't it? Mm. A gammon, not a bacon. Pig, I was close. It means something entirely different. So you could call your child whatever you like, and then all of a sudden, it means something else and it's derogatory. Why can't people just live and let live? Problem solved. Oh, Renee. My parents chose names that couldn't be shortened. That was my mum's wisdom with Elaine. And then Mike appeared and said Laney, and she nearly belted him. Mm. No, that was my mum's rationale, hence Karen being the second one, because it could get shortened to Kaz. So she wanted it that it couldn't be shortened. Devious she was. Devious. What can I say?
Lola's a good name.
Oh, Carol, I'm loving that. Carol's mum called her Carol so it couldn't be shortened, and now she calls me Carrie. It's something to do with parents, isn't it? Maybe when you've had a baby, it's not the best time to think about giving that baby a name. Deb says, never heard Nimrod referred to as stupid, must be very localised. Exactly, neither have I. I mean, you would expect these days, geography, you kind of pick up on from anywhere. And I've never heard that, not even in the States. I mean, I've certainly never heard it here. And they were giving like examples. Oh, that means idiot. I'm like, does it? Really? But anything could mean anything.
It must be a Seattle expression, because Kim's heard of it, isn't it? So.
What? How would you define it, Kim? Hello, DJ Sweetie. Nearly missed that. Glad you enjoyed it. It's just odd the way parents go on. I was going to be, because how does this work with my mother's logic of not shortening names? If I was a boy, I was going to be Stephen Michael or Michael Stephen. Well, let's be honest, if there's two names that can be shortened, they're the ones.
I was going to be Helen.
I thought you were going to be Vanessa.
Also going to be Vanessa. It was, one of us was going to be Helen, the other was going to be Vanessa.
But you were both lads.
We were both lads, yeah.
Laugh of it is she calls you anything but your name. She very seldom calls you Mike.
She calls me Doll.
She just calls everybody Doll. She's a huge fan of, what's that thing?
Guys and Dolls.
Guys and Dolls. And she just calls everyone Doll. But she also calls you Little M, Mikey, Mickey, Mick, MHT. She calls you anything. It's like, but Mike's the last thing that she'll call him. Oh. What was Jai's middle name?
Felix.
Felix. So she calls him JFT, doesn't she? Or is there another initial?
Ghosh Thomas, isn't it? Thomas
GT.
Ghosh.
So
GT.
it would be...
No, it's TG.
It's complicated.
It's the opposite of us.
That's just to be different.
It's TG, not GT.
So he's JFTG. And she
Yeah.
just uses his initials. Oh, for crying out loud.
Congratulations, Carol.
Oh, congratulations. That's wonderful. They've called her Maddie, not Madeline. Maddie's a lovely name. 2 weeks old. Oh, wow. Deb was sitting in a webinar and the speaker used every slang word in the book. You're sitting there thinking, not everyone's from England or the States. I try and be so careful, especially in training. We use phrases in the UK. If you were face-to-face, we'd say Blue Petered something, meaning here's one I did earlier. But I try not to. It just depends on the circumstances.
I'll tell you one I try and avoid. You know, it comes in your head and you say, no, I can't say that. And I'll say what that means in plain English is, knowing 90% of my audience are from China or Poland or Sweden.
Don't go there, Mike. Don't go there. Oh, dear. Oh, that'd be great, Carol. Let's have a look. I'm sure she's absolutely perfect. Long as she's healthy. It's all that matters, isn't it? Oh, yeah, great fun. Great fun with names. Mum had a lot of fixed opinions, didn't she, that we had to contend with. Oh, she did. Anyway, hopefully we have answered all of those questions. Glad you enjoyed the show. We'll be thinking about the next one, won't we? After we've thought about Monday and what's going to happen on Monday and all of the excitement. Oh, will it be an iMac or will it not be an iMac? Will it be Timothy teasing me with an iMac? Probably, knowing Timothy.
Timothy or Timmy?
Timmy.
Or Tim?
Timmy Babes. Have you noticed, though, you never see him ever in the same room, do you?
As Paul O'Grady.
As Paul O'Grady. Never see Timmy and Paul O'Grady together because they are one and the same. They are one and the same. I think he's raking in a double pay on that one, definitely. That means, doesn't it, that maybe Timmy could dress up as Lily Savage. Yeah. That would work as well. That's a British thing. I will get photos. Will I get photos? You're very welcome, Carol. Hopefully I will see you on Tuesday. I might even see you on Monday as well. I'm busy reading my book. I'm being very good.
See you,
Kim
Kimmy.
is hoping for an iMac. We're all hoping for an iMac, Kim. Fingers crossed. For the moment, though, until Monday, it is good night from me.
And good night from me.
And we will both see you next time. Stay safe,
safe,
guys.